My wife said spouses weren't allowed at her college reunion, but a friend sent me photos of her happily spending time with her ex-boyfriend. Helen, my wife of 7 years, stated 6 weeks ago that she was planning to attend her 10-year college reunion in Colorado. She asked if I wanted to join her, explaining that it was a relaxed weekend with everyone bringing their partners. I accepted since I had never been to Colorado and thought it would be nice to meet the folks she had spent 4 years with. Helen appeared eager about the vacation, discussing hiking trails and places we might try. She even suggested we prolong our stay by a couple of days to make it a short vacation. We booked flights jointly, and I took time off from work. I bought some new hiking boots and a jacket appropriate for the Colorado temperature. Helen and I spent the evenings poring over images from her undergraduate days, and she pointed out friends I'd meet. There was Mark, who had attended our wedding with his wife Jennifer and introduced Helen to her first job, and Carlos, who organized an annual charity run in which Helen participated. I noted she never mentioned Tyler, her college boyfriend, despite previous chats indicating that he was an essential part of her college experience. They had been together for over 3 years before breaking up in their final year. Then, around 10 days before the trip, Helen informed me that the reunion organizers had changed their minds and were no longer accepting spouses due to venue capacity limits. She appeared sad and apologized for the adjustment. I told her that was all right and that I'd spend the weekend catching up on household duties. I noticed she immediately shifted the conversation whenever I sought for further information about the new arrangements. When I specifically inquired which other spouses had been excluded, she vaguely mentioned Mark's wife and a few others before bringing up a problem with her work assignment. Helen packed the night before her trip, as I watched television in our bedroom. She appeared to take extra care with her dress selection, carrying several more possibilities than she normally would for a 4-day trip. She packed her prettiest gowns, including one she had recently purchased but had yet to wear. When I commented on this, she stated wanted to appear good in photos because everyone would be comparing how much they had changed since graduation. She also packed more cosmetics than usual and took particular care organizing her amenities. The day after Helen went for the reunion, I received a text message from Mark, one of her college friends whom I met at our wedding. His message informed me that Helen had been spending all of her time with her college lover Tyler. Mark also said that he had seen them walk into Tyler's cabin and stay there for more than an hour while the rest of the group was on a hike. According to Mark, Helen informed everyone that I would be unable to attend due to an important work project. He attached a photo of the reunion schedule, which showed no restrictions on inviting companions. I stared at the message for about an hour. Helen and I had not been having any issues. We had been discussing starting a family next year. We had just finished renovating our kitchen and planned to tackle the bathrooms next month. We'd even begun looking at larger homes in neighborhoods with good schools. I had never suspected her of being dishonest before. I called her in the evening to see how things were going. During our call, Helen described the reunion as fantastic, noting a hike and cookout. When I casually inquired about the venue and whether the no spouses policy was justified, she promptly confirmed that it was owing to the lodge's restricted accommodation capacity. Then I inquired if Tyler was present, attempting to make it sound like an afterthought. After a considerable gap, she stated that he couldn't make it and was now residing in Europe. After we hung up, I checked our cell phone bill online. Helen made several calls to a number I didn't recognize in the weeks leading up to the reunion. The calls became more frequent as the reunion approached. The most recent call was 47 minutes long and took place the day before she left. I copied the number and texted Mark to see if he knew who it was. He confirmed that it belonged to Tyler, who had returned from London 6 months earlier following his divorce. I packed my bag and traveled to my sister's place. She is a family law attorney. I showed her Mark's text, the reunion schedule, and phone records before explaining the problem. My sister advised me not to jump to conclusions, and suggested that I speak with Helen when she returned, since the calls could be benign. When I pointed out that Helen lied about Tyler's absence and told everyone I couldn't come due to work, my sister acknowledged my concern but reminded me that 7 years of marriage deserved more than 3 days of doubt. She recommended waiting to see if there was a legitimate explanation before taking severe measures. I slept on my sister's couch for the next 3 nights. Helen did not call me back after our talk, which seemed unusual for a 4-day trip. She sent some generic updates and images from group outings, but nothing personal. The photographs were always of large groups, never of her alone or with specific people. I explored social media and discovered several images of the reunion shared by other guests. In 3 of them, I could see Helen and Tyler standing close together. In one, his hand was on her lower back, while in another, they were seated apart from the rest of the group, deep in conversation. When she was due to return, I went back to her house to confront her. I printed out the phone records, screenshots of images I'd obtained online, and the reunion itinerary, which showed no spouse limitations. I put them on the kitchen table and waited. Helen's smile faded when she walked in and saw me sitting at the kitchen table, papers spread out. Her countenance changed from surprise to concern when she saw the documents. During our conversation, Helen confirmed Tyler was at the reunion but insisted that nothing had happened and that they were just friends now. When confronted on her claims, she admitted that the organizers had not truly barred spouses. She just thought it could be awkward because Tyler would be present. She stated she was attempting to prevent an awkward situation for everyone. When I showed her the phone records from her 47-minute talk with Tyler the day before the trip, she attempted to deflect by calling my phone record check invasive. She stated Tyler contacted about the reunion because he was apprehensive about seeing everyone after his divorce and wanted to know who would be there. I pointed out that this was their 12th call together in 3 weeks, not just a one-time talk regarding attendees. I explained that I had already spoken with my sister about divorce options. Helen got visibly agitated. She insisted that nothing occurred to Tyler. She stated she was simply being a friend to someone going through a difficult period following their divorce. According to her story, they just went to his cabin to fetch something from his car, and Mark missed their return since he had already departed for the climb. She maintained she was only assisting Tyler with his divorce and had even paid for the majority of his meals while he was between jobs. I showed her the social media photographs of his hand on her back. She dismissed it as people crammed close for a group photo, despite the fact that there was plenty of space around them in the photo. I told her I was going to spend the night at my sister's because I needed to think. Helen followed me as I packed, her voice growing increasingly agitated as she said I was overreacting to nothing and that I was willing to give up 7 years of marriage over insignificant texts and images. She mentioned our future plans for children in the home we were considering purchasing. As I zipped my bag, she blocked the bedroom doorway, imploring me to stay and sort things out. I simply waited till she moved aside and then departed without replying to the accusations. Helen phoned 27 times that night. She left 14 voicemail messages, each one more dramatic than the last. I didn't pay attention to most of them. Over the next 2 days, she texted me frequently, alternately apologizing, explaining, and accusing me of being unreasonable. My sister agreed to postpone any legal procedures while I thought things over. I simply don't know what to do anymore. 7 years of marriage, and I never saw this coming. My head is spinning, trying to make sense of everything. My buddies are split. Half saying I should listen to her entirely, and that couples have survived worse. The other half claims that lying alone reveals who she truly is. I can't eat. Did anyone else catch their spouse lying about something like this? I never expected to be in this position, and I honestly don't recognize my life right now. Update 1. I'd like to thank everyone who responded on my initial post. I read every single comment, even if I was unable to react to all of them. During the most difficult times of my life, this community has provided me with incredible support. So many of you had similar experiences, which made me feel less alone in this. To those who have asked for an update, it has been 2 weeks since I learned of Helen's lies. I've chosen to move forward with the divorce. After speaking with my sister and thoroughly weighing everything, I felt I couldn't go forward from this violation of trust. I phoned Mark again to seek additional information. He offered to meet me near his workplace. Mark showed me more images from the reunion, pointing out how Helen and Tyler sat together for every meal and activity. He showed me a group shot from the first night's dinner, where the allotted seating was organized alphabetically. However, Helen had moved her name card and sat next to Tyler instead of her allotted seat. Mark claimed that he hadn't intended to get involved, but seeing them go throughout the trek seemed wrong. His wife had noticed too, and pushed him to inform me. He confirmed that Helen and Tyler spent the most of the reunion together, frequently leaving from the main group to share private jokes and sat together at each meal. Another classmate mentioned how they appeared to have picked up where they left off in college. Regarding the cabin incident, Mark presented a timeline that contradicted Helen's account. The hike was supposed to last 90 minutes along a nearby national park route. Helen and Tyler vanished around 15 minutes into the hike, claiming they had left something at the cottage and would catch up. They were not with the group when they returned and did not attend the post-hike lunch. They reappeared around 30 minutes after everyone had finished eating, extending their absence far beyond the few minutes Helen mentioned. Tyler cracked a joke about getting lost on the route, which made several people uncomfortable, given how evident their absence had been. When I inquired why he decided to tell me, Mark indicated that he and his wife had experienced infidelity in their relationship several years prior. They had worked through it, but only because the truth was revealed instantly. He believed that secrets damaged marriages faster than mistakes, and that I deserved to know what was going on. I met Helen at a coffee shop to explain my decision. She arrived 20 minutes early and had already ordered my regular drink. She produced a folder containing images from the reunion, pointing out group photos of many people, including Tyler, in an attempt to illustrate that nothing untoward occurred. However, those photographs only showed the arranged events, not the free time when Mark claimed they were alone together. She also received written emails from the reunion organizer addressing arrangements, but none of them indicated any restrictions for spouses. She questioned why I would abandon 7 years of marriage based on what Mark stated, alleging that he had always been envious of her friendships and even mentioning his behavior at our wedding. I mentioned that this was about more than simply Mark's account. It was about the lies she told to ensure that I wouldn't be present while her ex was. The fact that she had devised an elaborate deceit rather than simply being honest about the matter demonstrated a fundamental breach of trust. Helen admitted making a mistake in how she handled the incident, but she maintained to deny anything occurred to Tyler. She offered marriage counseling, noting that she had already made a preliminary visit for the following week. When I declined, she got obviously frustrated, reading through her folder of evidence to ensure that nothing untoward had happened. She urged me to speak with someone else from the reunion, mentioning 2 people I'd never met who might allegedly provide a different account of events. The next day, I began searching for apartments. I located one near my work and signed a 6-month lease. I paid the security deposit and first month's rent with my personal account rather than our joint account. When I told Helen I was moving out, she called her parents. They came over that evening and tried to intercede, with her father emphasizing that every marriage has its ups and downs, and her mother crying and pleading with us to seek counseling before making any final decisions. Her father mentioned his own past sins, which her mother had forgiven, implying that the situation was comparable. The following weekend, I relocated the majority of my personal belongings to the little flat. 2 buddies assisted me in transporting my possessions while Helen was at her parents' place. I left a letter indicating which furniture I had taken and which ones I would return later. Helen started telling our friends her version of events, depicting Mark as a troublemaker and me as difficult. She claimed I misread innocent exchanges and overreacted without giving her the opportunity to explain. My sister filed the initial divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences. Helen texted saying she was still hoping I would change my mind before things got too far. When I did not react, she sent an email with links to marriage counselors in our area, claiming she had studied their qualifications and discovered one who specialized in trust restoration. I did not open the links. Does it ever get easier on Reddit? I'm really lost right now. Update 2, it has been a month since my last update. The divorce is proceeding forward. Helen first challenged it, stating that irreconcilable differences were not a viable basis in the circumstances. My sister indicated that this was only a delay tactic, as our state recognizes no-fault divorce regardless of the objection. Helen filed a lengthy response to the divorce petition, requesting marriage counseling before continuing and claimed the marriage may be saved. Helen has alternated between contrite notes and hostile allegations. She came to my flat twice. Once with flowers and once with divorce papers covered in handwritten comments disputing various terms. During her second visit, she refused to leave until I spoke with her, culminating in an awkward standoff in the hallway of my building. My neighbor eventually intervened and let me go back inside. My building management has been instructed not to let her in again. Helen also approached my sister directly, attempting to get her to cease representing me. She sent emails to my sister, alleging I was acting strangely and didn't really want the divorce. My sister forwarded them to me without comment. Helen then attempted to persuade our common acquaintances that I should rethink. 2 friends contacted me, evidently concerned about how quickly the marriage was collapsing, after only hearing Helen's version of events. I ran across Jamie, one of Tyler's pals who also knew my wife, at the grocery store last week. We met at our wedding and he recognized me. During our talk, I brought up the incident with Helen and Tyler at the reunion. Jamie appeared perplexed and explained that Tyler had told him Helen had been all over him the entire weekend. According to Jamie, Tyler stated that Helen claimed our marriage was in trouble and was likely to end in divorce. Jamie then said that Tyler confirmed they had hooked up on the final night of the reunion. When I inquired for clarity, Jamie confirmed that Tyler clearly mentioned that they had slept together. He apologized for telling me this information, but he felt I deserved to know the truth. Jamie said that Tyler had expressed ambivalence about the situation because he knew me from the wedding, but Helen had been insistent in assuring him that our marriage was virtually ended. According to Jamie, Tyler had given him text messages from Helen sent during the reunion that were clearly amorous in nature. I thanked Jamie for the information and stopped shopping. After returning to my car, I called my sister to tell her what I had learned. She encouraged me not to approach Helen with this information just yet, since it could be valuable during divorce procedures. She mentioned that if Helen was disputing the divorce, evidence of adultery could affect our strategy, and she suggested letting her handle that element. She suggested that I forward any messages or emails from Helen to her before answering so that I don't say anything that could exacerbate the situation. Helen arrived at my apartment unannounced that evening, having been let in by a neighbor. She brought me dinner from my favorite restaurant and offered to talk. For nearly an hour, she reiterated her previous explanations. She was simply helping a friend, nothing occurred, Mark misunderstood, she loved me, and she would never cheat. She indicated starting therapy to figure out why she had handled things so poorly and proposed couples counseling again. She brought up our intentions for children and how we had always discussed growing old together. I remained mute throughout her tirade, reflecting on what Jamie had said to me that day. When she was finished, I, being the naive moron I am, went against my sister's advice and informed her about my incident with Jamie and Tyler's allegation of hooking up at the reunion. She grew clearly enraged, insisting Jamie was lying and Tyler wouldn't say it. She speculated that Tyler may have told Jamie to lie because he was furious that she had stopped communicating to him shortly after the reunion, realizing their friendship was not worth damaging her marriage. She questioned why I would believe a virtual stranger over her, accusing me of hunting for reasons to break our marriage. When I inquired if she acknowledged continuing to communicate with Tyler after the reunion, she grew defensive. She packed her belongings and immediately went, slamming the door behind her. The following day, she sent a lengthy email claiming to have contacted Tyler, who denied telling Jamie anything about hooking up. She claims it was all a mistake or planned sabotage. A week later, Tyler called me. He explained that Helen had called him constantly, sometimes from multiple lines, after he blocked her, accusing him of spreading rumors. He claimed he only wanted the drama to cease. Tyler acknowledged exaggerating when telling Jamie that he and Helen had slept together. He said that he and Helen spent a lot of time together at the reunion, but they merely kissed and did not sleep together. He claimed the kiss occurred on the final night, after they had both consumed alcohol at the farewell supper. Tyler went on to say that Helen had informed him that our marriage was experiencing troubles, that we hadn't been connecting lately, and that she wasn't sure what she wanted. He claimed she had instigated the majority of their interactions at the reunion, seeking him out during activities and asking they meet up alone. Tyler seemed astonished when I told him we were planning to have a baby the next year and were not having any troubles. He apologized for his role in the incident, stating he should have kept his distance knowing she was married. Following the call, I passed Tyler's contact information to my sister, who urged me not to address Helen directly about the contradictions. She urged that the legal procedure continue without further emotional clashes. I did not reply to Helen's email justifying herself. 2 days later, she suddenly agreed to the divorce terms provided by my counsel, including the asset division we had agreed upon. The rapidity with which she accepted the divorce after weeks of battling made me wonder what had changed. My sister speculated that Helen might have understood Tyler had spoken to me and decided to cut her losses rather than having more details revealed during contested processes. Update 3. It has been a month since my last update. The house has been advertised for sale, and we have already received 2 bids above the asking amount. We've agreed to divide the proceeds evenly once the mortgage is paid off. Helen returned to the flat, this time with her mother. They brought boxes to collect some home goods that we agreed she could take. While Helen was gathering her belongings, her mother attempted to engage me in conversation about marriage troubles and second chances. She told a story of nearly parting up with her husband shortly after Helen was born owing to his lengthy work hours and her suspicions of an affair, which proved to be false. She underlined how delighted she was that they had worked through their issues rather than separating. I helped them carry boxes to their car but avoided engaging in conversation beyond basic civility. As they were about to leave, Helen requested to meet with me alone while her mother waited in the car. Her mother appeared hesitant to leave us, glancing back numerous times as she moved towards the car. Helen's demeanor altered once she was alone. She seemed more gloomy than in past conversations. She indicated that she needed to clear her conscience and admitted to lying about why I couldn't attend the reunion, as well as spending significant time with Tyler there. However, she stated that they never slept together and only kissed once after the farewell supper, when they were both drunk. She stated she stopped it from continuing and immediately regretted the kiss. She couldn't understand why Tyler would tell Jamie they had hooked up, implying that in his opinion, a kiss constituted hooking up, or that he was embellishing to save face. She also admitted to deleting text messages between her and Tyler before the reunion, confessing that their chats occasionally devolved into reminiscing about their previous relationship, which she knew would upset me if I saw them. She said that what happened in the cabin was completely harmless. They had gone to grab something from his car but ended up talking for far longer than expected about his recent divorce and feelings of failure. When I inquired why she was telling me this now, Helen replied that because the divorce was inevitable, she wanted me to know the truth. She admitted to making a succession of stupid decisions and dealing with the repercussions, but she denied being disloyal to that extent. She also denied having misgivings about our marriage before the reunion, contradicting Tyler's statement, and stated that he may have misconstrued what she said about being worried about having children. She handed me an envelope containing concert tickets to a band that we both admired. She said that she had bought them before the reunion as a surprise for our forthcoming anniversary. She didn't expect me to use them with her, but she assumed I would want them anyhow. I accepted the envelope without commenting. After she went, Tyler texted me that Helen had asked him to message me. He clarified that they did not sleep together during the reunion, but instead kissed. He revealed to Jamie that something happened while he was inebriated, but argued that it was an exaggeration. He apologized for his involvement in the incident and vowed not to contact either of us again. Their stories now matched, giving me pause. However, I then remembered all of the past lies. Even if they simply kissed, Helen had concocted a tale to spend time with an ex-boyfriend, then lied again when questioned. Whether they had sex or just kissed, the underlying breach of trust remained the same. The fact that both of their stories had shifted over time made me question the most recent version as well. The next day, Mark provided me with screenshots of a furious argument between him and Helen, in which she accused him of wrecking her marriage by messaging me. In her conversations, she referred to him as a backstabbing friend and accused him of misinterpreting harmless encounters. Mark confirmed all he told me and added that numerous others at the reunion had witnessed Helen and Tyler's behavior but were hesitant to intervene. He recounted particular incidents that I had not heard about before, such as Helen and Tyler missing from an evening bonfire for more than an hour. Helen stated in her letters to Mark that she and Tyler talked about their previous relationship during the reunion and reminisced about old times. She accused Mark of making assumptions about their cabin time, but she didn't deny they'd been alone together for longer than she had previously reported. She also mentioned inside jokes and light flirting, which viewers should not have taken seriously. For me, each new piece of knowledge simply reinforced my decision. Even Jamie's late statement about the kiss appeared to be a half-truth intended to explain away her disclosure while downplaying her conduct. The pattern of dishonesty, followed by scant admissions when presented with facts, had eroded any basis for confidence. I focused on starting my new life. I bought furnishings for my apartment rather than using the temporary things I had moved from our home. My sister referred me to her husband's friend, who needed help rebuilding his basement, which has given me something to work on in the evenings and weekends. Helen has ceased reaching out as frequently. According to common acquaintances, she has been telling people that she made a mistake, but that my refusal to forgive was the true reason our marriage terminated. Some believe her, but others don't. I've quit attempting to amend the record or justify my judgment. Those who know me understand, while those who don't are irrelevant to my future. The divorce will be finalized in the next few months, ideally as soon as feasible. I'll provide an update then. Final update. The divorce was completed last week. I expected to receive the final papers without any drama, but that was not the case. Helen emailed me 2 days before our divorce became legal. The subject line was "the whole truth." I almost deleted it before reading it, but curiosity got the best of me. Helen ultimately acknowledged in the email that she and Tyler had slept together twice during their reunion. She claimed she fought the divorce so hard at first because she couldn't bear accepting the whole truth, even to herself. Tyler contacted her a month before the reunion, according to her email, and they had been communicating on a regular basis since then. When she discovered he was there, she purposefully made up the tale about couples not being welcome. She revealed information I had not previously known. Their first night together had been arranged ahead of time, rather than being a spontaneous decision affected by alcohol, as she had previously stated. She had planned to meet him in his cabin after the welcome supper, telling others she needed to make a business call. Their second encounter came after the goodbye meal, when most people were preoccupied with group activities. She apologized for everything, especially for trying to make me appear irrational to our friends for seeking a divorce. She admitted to manipulating the issue by only acknowledging parts of the truth when presented with evidence. She concluded by claiming she was not asking for forgiveness, but rather to cease living with the lies. I sent the email to my sister without comment. She called me right away to see if I was okay. I confirmed I was fine, as I had suspected all along. When she asked if I wanted to utilize this admission in the divorce process, I rejected, indicating that the terms were fair as they were and that all I wanted was to get it done. The documentation was filed in my records, but I saw no point in using it to punish Helen further. I did not reply to Helen's email. There was nothing more to say. Helen's sister called me the day after her divorce was finalized. We'd always gotten along nicely at family gatherings. She had learnt of Helen's confession email and wanted to apologize for how her family had treated me during the process. She stated that Helen had finally told their parents everything, and they were embarrassed by how they had pushed me to reconcile. I informed her that it was not their fault. They were merely supporting their daughter, as was expected. She emphasized that they didn't blame me for the outcome, with her father feeling particularly guilty about what he said to me during his intervention attempt. 2 days later, I received another email from Helen, requesting that we meet one final time to return some of my personal items she discovered while packing up the house, which we had agreed to sell as part of our divorce settlement. I agreed to meet. Helen arrived 10 minutes late and handed me a tiny box containing my grandfather's antique watch and some images from my childhood mixed with hers. The watch had been missing for months, and I accused Helen of misplacing it while cleaning. She claimed she had found it a long time ago, but had hidden it after an argument and forgotten about it until packing. After an awkward pause, she thanked me for not using her confession email against her legally. I just stated that it would not have benefited either of us. Her looks had changed. She had cut her hair short and was thinner than when I last saw her. She indicated that she will continue with therapy in order to better comprehend her behavior. We finished our coffees in silence. As we were about to leave, she asked if I would consider remaining in touch on occasion as friends. I politely rejected, explaining that I believed a clean split would be healthy for both of us. She nodded and didn't press any further. Thank you, Reddit, for being there during this journey. When I initially commented here, around a year ago, I was absolutely lost. Your counsel, encouragement, and similar tales helped me get through the darkest times in my life. My family abandoned me at a rest stop when I was 22, leaving me stranded with no money or phone. Now, they have contacted me and asked for money. That summer, I turned 22. It was supposed to be just like any other day. I'd work at my father's hardware store for money and live at home because, according to banks, my father's college was not practical. I was also the perpetual punching bag for my golden kid brother Alan. We weren't destitute, but we weren't the sort to go on Disney vacations. So, when banks stated that we were going on a family road trip to my uncle's wedding in Colorado, I should have known something was up. 3 days into that horrible road journey, I was already regretting not making up an excuse to stay at home. My father and Alan had been taking turns playing their favorite game, making Salvador's life terrible. Mom, Irene, would periodically say, "That's enough," in her frail voice, but we all knew it was just a show. Look, I need to explain something about my family. Banks wasn't your typical dad. He was the type to wake you up at 3 a.m., to rant about a chore you forgot, or who will toss away your belongings if they get in his way. He had been telling me I was useless since I was able to grasp words. Alan quickly realized that he could either be Dad's mini-me or become like me. Guess which road he took? That morning, we came to a rest spot in Colorado that seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. Only fields, mountains in the distance, and a depressing tiny restroom facility with vending machines. I had been sleeping in the back of our Suburban and needed to stretch my legs and use the restroom. Dad and Alan were laughing over something, and Mom was checking her makeup in the visor mirror. I remember what I was wearing: an old Metallica t-shirt, trousers with a hole in one knee, and these beat-up Vans that I'd had for years. I did not take my phone because it was charging in the car. I didn't take my wallet, so why would I? We were in the middle of nowhere, and I was just taking a piss. I spent 10 minutes in that bathroom, perhaps less. When I walked out, blinking in the Colorado sun, the parking spot was vacant. Our dark green Suburban was gone. At first, I assumed they had moved it as a hoax. I wandered around the whole rest area. Nothing. That's the thing about betrayal by your own blood. It hits differently than any other type. I sat on the curb for an hour, telling myself they were simply trying to scare me and would be back. People came and left, and a few gave me strange looks. A trucker questioned if I was all right. I lied, saying I was waiting for my girlfriend in the bathroom. He nodded and departed. After 2 hours, I began to feel a chill in my stomach. They were not coming back. My initial thought was to borrow someone's phone and call them, begging them to come fetch me. However, when I was about to approach a mother with 2 children, something stopped me. A lifetime of memories flooded through my mind, every humiliation, every time they'd laughed at my expense, and every joke that was essentially cruelty with a punchline. I almost heard them. Alan's voice. "Dude, I bet he's crying right now." My father, "He'll figure it out if he's not as stupid as he appears." My mother's faint protest, which did not change anything. So, I made a decision. I approached that mother and asked to use her phone, but I did not contact my family. I contacted information and was given the phone number for the nearest shelter in Grand Junction, which is around 40 miles away. Then I asked her if she could give me a ride into town and said that my family had an emergency and had to leave, but they would send someone for me later. She hesitated, but I must have been innocent enough, since she agreed. That first night in the shelter was a reality check. I had nothing except the clothing on my back, no identification, money, or connections. Dave, the shelter employee, let me use their computer to seek out my uncle's address from a wedding invitation I had seen. I thought I would be able to travel to the wedding and see my family, but then I sat there staring at the screen, wondering why. Why pursue down folks who literally abandoned me on the side of the road for laughs? Instead, I set up a fresh email account. I searched up services for folks who needed emergency ID replacements, Googled cash-paying employment, and devised a plan. 2 days later, I was washing dishes at a small diner named Sunny. Geraldine, the proprietor, was a 60-something woman with purple-streaked gray hair and more tattoos than one would anticipate. I'd gone in, asked if they needed help, and informed her that my wallet had been stolen but that I needed work. She sized me up and remarked, "The dishwasher quit yesterday. You take from me, and you will die. Start now." That's the thing about rock bottom, you can only get up from there. For a week, I worked double shifts, slept in the shelter, and dressed in donated clothing. Dave assisted me in the process of obtaining a replacement ID by contacting vital records in my home state. With my first paycheck, I purchased a low-cost pay-as-you-go phone from Walmart. 7 days after they abandoned me, my phone rang. The number was unknown. I responded, and it was my mother, her voice shaking. She inquired as to my whereabouts and my well-being. They had been looking everywhere. It was only supposed to be a joke, she explained. They waited down the road for 20 minutes, returned, and couldn't find me. I listened to her stress and phony compassion. In the background, I could hear my father telling me to stop acting so theatrical and go to Uncle Rick's. I heard Alan laughing. "Salvador, are you there? Say something, we've been worried sick." That icy feeling in my gut was gone. Now there was just clarity. "You wanted to see if I could make it on my own," I explained, my voice firmer than it had ever been when speaking to them. "So watch me." I hung up, blocked the number, and then blocked every family number I could think of. I went to the Verizon store the next day and changed my phone number totally. I envisioned them becoming increasingly irritated as they realized their punching bag was not returning to be pummeled. 1 month later, I had my own studio apartment above a laundromat. It was small and always smelled like fabric softener, but it was mine. I worked my way up to prep cook at Sunny's, and Geraldine was showing me how to properly chop veggies without losing a finger. Sometimes I'd check my old email address, which my family knew. Messages piled up from Mom. "Please come home, we're sorry." From Dad. "This childish stunt needs to end right now." From Alan. "Dude, it was just a joke. Stop being such a..." I never replied. Not once. The thing about freedom is that once you've tasted it, you can't go back to the cage. I will not pretend it was easy. Some nights, I'd look through Instagram and see photographs of people with normal families who truly loved each other, and I'd feel an aching that no amount of them could satisfy. I experienced nights when loneliness threatened to take me whole. The holidays were the worst. But every morning, I'd wake up in my dingy little apartment, which smelled like Downy, go to my dishwashing job, where no one labeled me worthless, and construct my life one brick at a time. 3 months after they abandoned me at that rest stop, I checked my inbox for the last time. There was a fresh message from my mother. "Your grandmother is asking about you. Please just let us know you're alive." I closed the email, erased the account, and put my old SIM card in the dumpster behind Sunny's. That night, Geraldine showed me how to bake her renowned apple pie. She stated I had good pastry skills. It was the first real compliment I had received in many years. I never looked back. Update: 5 years after being abandoned at that Colorado rest area, I found myself staring at a familiar face in my Facebook page. Not because I was trolling my family's profiles, well, maybe I was, but because Alan had recently been mentioned in a local news piece back home. He'd received a DUI and wrapped his automobile around a telephone pole. Nobody heard except the pole. The publication had utilized one of his high school football photos. He appeared youthful and smug, in stark contrast to the fat mugshot below. That's the thing with karma. It goes at its own pace and never forgets an address. By then, I had established something like a life in Colorado. My terrible studio above the laundromat was eventually exchanged for a 1-bedroom with actual windows. I had worked my way up from dishwasher to line cook to assistant manager at Sunny's. Geraldine still ran the property with an iron fist and a flour-dusted glove, but she'd started treating me more like a quirky nephew than a charity case. My first major purchase, when I had actual savings, was a good laptop. Nothing spectacular, just enough to attend online community college classes in business management and basic accounting, which banks always claimed were for individuals who couldn't perform actual work. I'd spend my mornings at Sonny's, afternoons studying, and evenings at work. Rinse, repeat. Look, I'm not going to pretend that what occurred didn't leave me messed up. Trust issues? More like trust subscriptions, which I could cancel whenever someone got too near. I'd made only 2 friends in 5 years. My neighbor Doug, who played bass in a bad garage band and occasionally brought me homemade beer that tastes like hoppy dishwater, and Geraldine, if she qualified as a friend rather than a boss. That changed when Kendra began arriving at Sonny's every Tuesday and Thursday, like clockwork. She always got the same thing, Denver omelet with no tomatoes and extra coffee. She was often sitting at the counter with a textbook, med school. I later discovered she had this habit of completely shutting out while studying. For several minutes, she held the fork halfway to her mouth. I started timing her once, and her time was 7 minutes and 23 seconds before she noticed she was holding cold eggs. I had been giving her coffee refills for 4 months before she saw me. I mean, you truly saw me. Her eyes widened slightly as she explained that my name tag was spelled incorrectly. It wasn't, but it became our strange little joke. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she would point out that I was wearing the wrong name Salvador. I would act startled. It was the stupidest flirtation ever, but it worked. Our first date was not even intended to be a date. Her study group canceled at the last minute, and she had a reservation at this pizza place that was tough to get into. I happened to be cleaning the counter when she received the cancellation SMS. The next thing I knew, I was seated across from her at Antonio's, both of us uneasily realizing this was precisely like a date. 6 months later, she moved into my flat. A year later, we moved into a somewhat larger place together. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom with a bathroom where the toilet did not run all the time and neighbors who did not practice bass solos at 2 a.m. Meanwhile, I used false accounts to keep track of my family. I'm not proud of it, but there it is. Dad's hardware store started failing after the Home Depot opened on the outskirts of town. I noticed him talking about it on community Facebook pages, with remarks becoming increasingly frantic and nasty. Mom's social media became a weird shrine to family, with regular throwback photos of us all smiling and postings about missing her boys, which was rich. She would tag Alan but never mention me, as if I had been erased. Alan moved from job to job, posting vague updates about haters and new opportunities, the standard social media smokescreen of someone whose life is circling the abyss. 3 years in, Geraldine approached me during inventory and informed me she was considering opening a second Sonny's shop on the opposite side of town. She asked if I was interested in running it, rather than owning it. This is an important distinction. I didn't sleep that night because I kept thinking it was a test or a joke. People like me did not have opportunities like that. Banks had ensured I understood that much. That is the problem about poisonous beliefs. They remain in your system long after you have left the serpent. But I said yes because Kendra, who was half sleeping next me, whispered that it would be silly not to. Doug, through a haze of cannabis smoke, replied, "Duh, you practically run to the original place already." Because Geraldine was not Banks, wasn't my family, and had never made me feel useless. Sonny's East opened 6 months later, smaller than its predecessor and with a new menu, my menu. I worked 90-hour weeks for the first year and lost 10 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. I argued with Kendra about never being home. I came home to passive-aggressive post-its on the fridge several times, but they worked. People arrived. People came back. The food was delicious and the atmosphere was good. We weren't getting rich, but we were making do. 4 years after being abandoned, I earned enough to assist Kendra with her medical school loans. Not all of them, those creatures are monstrous, but enough to make an impact. She cried when I handed her the payment confirmation. Not cinematic crying, but lovely mascara tears. Real sobbing, snotty, red-faced, hiccuping crying. I had never felt more like a true person than in that moment. Then my granny died. I found out on Facebook. Mom captioned this lengthy, emotional homage with a million heart emoticons. Grandma Rose was the only one in the family who ever stood up to Banks, the only one who appeared to notice me. She would slip me $20 when no one was looking and instruct me to save them for my escape. I believe she meant college. It turned out to be more literal than that. I considered going to the funeral and even looked up airfares. Kendra said she'd come with me and hold my hand throughout the traumatic reunion. Doug offered me his lousy hatchback to drive instead. Geraldine simply shrugged and said, "Dead people don't know if you're there or not, so do whatever brings you peace." I didn't go. Instead, I sent flowers. A generic sympathy arrangement, signed Salvador, with no return address or note. It's just me. The reaction on social media was quick. Mom is posting about signs and reaching out from beyond. Alan made cryptic remarks about prodigal sons. Banks said nothing publicly, but I could imagine the uproar behind closed doors. A week later, I received a friend request from a profile that I did not recognize. Some random name, no posts, and no buddies. I almost erased it until I noticed the message. It's Uncle Rick. Your mom gave me your old email, but it bounced back. Are you okay? We've been worried. Your dad has been asking around about you. That night, I blocked the account. I had my first panic attack in 2 years, sitting on our bathroom floor at 3 a.m., trying not to wake Kendra, feeling like my lungs were collapsing, and picturing Banks chasing me down, showing up at Sonny's, and destroying everything I'd built. Kendra found me about an hour later. She didn't ask any questions. She simply sat with me, her shoulder touching mine. When I could finally breathe, she said the most basic thing: they can't take anything from you that you don't give them. The next morning, I called a lawyer for guidance on restraining orders, just in case. I adjusted the privacy settings on everything and requested Geraldine to notify staff not to disclose any information about me to anyone. Practical steps. Power what you have power over. 5 years to the day after being abandoned, I married Kendra in a tiny wedding at a state park. Doug was my best man. Geraldine cooked the cake and cried the whole time, mascara pouring down her wrinkled cheeks. Kendra's enormous, boisterous family embraced me immediately, her father cracking dad jokes that didn't make me cringe, and her mother hugging me without sending off alarms in my head. That's the thing with family. It can find you even when you're not looking. A week after the wedding, I saw it while going through my dummy account late at night. Banks posted on a community website, asking for information on his son Salvador, whose last known location is Grand Junction, Colorado. This is a family emergency. There was no emergency. I was already aware of this. What I didn't understand was why, after 5 years of silence, they were now hunting for me. So I probed deeper, made another phony account, joined community groups in my hometown, and pulled everything together piece by piece. The hardware company had closed, their house was in foreclosure, Mom was dealing with some medical concerns that she was hazy about, and Alan had returned home following his third DUI. They weren't seeking for me because they missed me, but because they needed something. And you know what? For the first time in 5 years, I smiled as I remembered them. Not because I was pleased with their tragedy, but because I discovered a crucial truth. I no longer cared. I closed the laptop, went into bed beside my sleeping wife, and made a decision. I would continue to observe from a distance, not out of hatred or love, but because sometimes the finest retribution is not what you do, but what you build, while they are busy destroying themselves. Finally, we have an update. It began with a LinkedIn notification. 15 years after being abandoned at that Colorado rest station, my perfectly planned existence had a flaw. Someone saw my profile 27 times in a single day. It's not rare for LinkedIn recruiters to do crazy things like that. What was remarkable was my brother's name, Alan Matthew. That is the thing with the past. It is patient. It will linger in the tall grass for years before striking. By then, my life had changed drastically from my first year in Grand Junction. Kendra had finished medical school, completed her residency, and was now working 3 days a week at a local clinic to spend more time at home with our children. We had 2, Ellie, 7, and Marcus, 4. The apartment above the laundromat had given way to a modest 4-bedroom home on the outskirts of town. Nothing spectacular, but with a yard where the kids could play and I could grow tomatoes, though they never quite worked out. Sonny's had expanded to 3 locations. Still not a major franchise or anything, but enough that I no longer had to work the line, except when someone called in sick. Geraldine had semi-retired 2 years before, but she still turned up unexpectedly to criticize how we made her pie crust recipe. I had made peace with my past, or so I thought. I still kept an eye on the family from afar, but the frequent checks had dwindled to maybe once every few months. Banks and Irene had downsized after losing their home, as far as I understood. Alan has been married, divorced, and married again. They all seem to have gone on with their lives, just as I had. However, the LinkedIn issue bothered me. 15 years of silence, and now this. I mentioned it to Kendra as we were performing our usual Sunday night activity. Folding laundry while half watching whatever Netflix show we were currently behind on. She paused, holding a mismatched sock in each hand, and asked whether I was all right. I nodded. What else could I say? That I was suddenly 22 years old again, stopped at a rest stop, and that I could hear Banks' voice in my head, calling me useless. 3 days later, I was in Sonny's East, the original second site, assisting with inventory because our supplier had sent the wrong type of coffee filters again, when Maya at the front desk called back to say there was a family looking for me. My first thought was of Kendra's parents, who occasionally surprised us when they passed through. I strolled out front, my thoughts already turning to how to persuade them to stay for supper. It was not Kendra's family. Banks appeared older, grayer, and his once intimidating physique had shrunk. Irene's face was pinched from years of effort, and her hair had been dyed an unnatural shade of brown. Alan resembled Banks at 40, with the same stance and technique of taking up space. There was a woman with them who I didn't recognize. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, and she was standing back as if she wasn't sure she belonged. Nobody spoke. The lunch rush cacophony faded away, leaving only my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. Banks broke first, asking for my name. I nodded, as my voice had evidently gone on vacation. Look, I'd envisioned this moment in 1,000 various ways over the course of 15 years. In some of them, I told them off brilliantly. In others, I was chilly and distant, unconcerned about their existence. In a couple awkward late-night situations, we even had a tearful reconciliation. Reality is invariably messier than fancy. I motioned to an empty table in the corner, asked Maya to get water, sat across from the folks who had once been my family, and waited. They'd discovered me through a magazine story titled Rocky Mountain Rising 10 Local Success Stories. It wasn't even a major feature, just a sidebar with a photo of me in front of Sonny's original location. But evidently, one of Mom's high school friends had moved to Colorado, saw it, and forwarded it to her with the caption, "Isn't this your son?" They'd made 107 missed calls to my former number in the years before it was disconnected. Mom had counted. She mentioned this as if it meant something. They spoke over each other. Mom mentioned how worried they had been. Banks about how I had misinterpreted what happened that day. Alan was uncomfortably trying to pretend like we were old friends catching up. The young woman, who turned out to be Alan's second wife, Poppy, simply regarded me with curiosity. I let them talk and watched as they spun their own version of reality in which they were not the villains. I noticed how Banks continued looking at the restaurant, mentally calculating how much it would be worth. I noticed Mom's fingers waver slightly as she grabbed for her water. I noticed Alan's studied charm faltering whenever he thought I wasn't staring directly at him. Finally, when they ran out of steam, I asked the only important question. Why now? That's when the true tale emerged, in parts and pieces among awkward silences. Banks had medical debts, heart issues, and no insurance. The second residence was being foreclosed upon. Alan's business idea, something obscure about cryptocurrencies, had flopped terribly. Mom required knee surgery, which she could not afford. They weren't there for reconciliation, but for money. I should have become angry. Should have thrown them away. Instead, I felt an unexpected emotion. Sympathy. They seemed so little and desperate. These giants who had formerly ruled my entire universe were simply imperfect, broken beings. I asked them to supper at my house that night, explaining that I needed to contemplate and chat to Kendra. They agreed enthusiastically. Banks are already halfway to calling it a done deal. The afternoon was weird. I picked up Ellie from her dance lesson and assisted Marcus with his preschool show and tell preparations, all while texting Kendra updates on who was coming to dinner. She volunteered to take the children to her sisters. I said no. I wanted them there. I wanted my family to meet my family. Dinner was chicken enchiladas, my specialty. That wasn't anything exceptional, it was simply a recipe from the back of an old El Paso box that I had modified over the years. Ellie set the table without being asked, meticulously placed the forks on the incorrect side until Kendra quietly corrected her. Marcus insisted on wearing his Spider-Man outfit because it was Tuesday, and it appears that Tuesday is now Spider-Man Day. When the doorbell rang, I nearly dropped the dish I was bringing to the table. Kendra clutched my arm as she passed, whispering that she had my back anyway. The children looked up with interest, realizing that something significant was happening. That's the thing about dreaded moments. When they occur, they're both worse and better than you expected. The introductions were awkward. Even after adjustments, Banks continued to refer to Kendra as Karen. Irene couldn't stop crying every time she looked at the kids, which terrified Marcus. Alan and Poppy were the least bad, making genuine attempts at polite conversation, but Alan kept hinting about family supporting family. After dinner, Kendra brought the kids upstairs for baths and bedtime, giving me a look that said, "Text if you need extraction." Then it was just me and them, sitting in a living room that felt too small. Banks began on the pitch, talking about how family sticks together and how he'd always known I'd be successful. A lie. How they only needed $20,000 to get back on their feet, alone, of course. I let him continue, then asked him if he remembered what he told me on my 18th birthday. He gave a blank gaze. I said to him, "At least you can't disappoint me anymore, once you're not legally my problem." I asked Mom if she recalled what she did after Banks tossed away my acceptance letter to community college. Nothing. She had done nothing. I asked Alan whether he remembered telling my first girlfriend that I was probably, in any case, when she came to the house seeking for me. They squirmed and made excuses. Banks' voice began to take on a deadly edge, which used to make me shrink. But here's what happened. I stopped shrinking. I was 15 years and a million miles away from that person. I went to my office, returned with an envelope, and delivered it to Banks. The check was for $73.50. Banks glanced at it, perplexed, and wondered what the hell this was supposed to be. I responded. In 2010, that was exactly what a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction to our hometown would have cost, the exact amount it would have taken for me to make it back home from where you abandoned me. The hush was absolute. Then Banks began shouting at me, calling me ungrateful and greedy, and claiming that I had always been a disappointment. The greatest hits record from my childhood is being played one more time. I didn't argue or shout back. Just stood up and informed them that it was time to leave. Mom used a different approach. Tears and guilt. How could I do this to my family? Alan went cold. The Pleasant Brothers mask had entirely slipped. Poppy simply seemed embarrassed for all of them. When they eventually departed, Banks crumpled the check and dropped it on our doorstep. I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs becoming unsteady. Kendra came downstairs and asked if I was all right. I nodded, not trusting my own voice. We cleaned up the dinner dishes in silence, checked on the sleeping children, and prepared for bed as if it were any other night. As I was configuring the security system, I accessed the front entrance camera on my phone. They remained in the driveway, arguing. Banks is gesticulating violently, and his mother is sobbing. Alan was looking at our house with an attitude that I know all too well, jealousy mingled with hatred. Finally, they hopped into their rental car and drove away. I have never seen or heard from them again. Do not expect to. The chapter is finished. That's the thing about revenge, the best type is something you live rather than do. Every beautiful moment with my children, every inside joke with Kendra, every peaceful Sunday morning with nothing to worry, and every ordinary day in a life constructed on my terms. I never got back home. I did something better. I constructed one. I've realized that I have lost all respect for my husband's willful ignorance, and it may damage my marriage. I, 33, and my husband, 37, were having a discussion about politics and we got onto the topic of our daughter, 7, which led to me expressing my fears about her rights and bodily autonomy. For context, my husband votes Republican and I have always considered myself independent but recently have been shifting very far away from my younger, carefree attitude toward politics. I love him very much and I know for a fact that he loves me, but I have started finding his opinions naive and lacking depth. He is a very good man though and has in the past changed his mind on several things when confronted with them. Further context, my cousin lives in a strict anti-abortion state and almost died a few years ago when the doctors waited until she was actively dying of sepsis before they decided it was okay to remove the dead baby from her body even though it had been dead for weeks beforehand. So needless to say I had a wake-up call and sharpened up my principles until they are very shiny and pointy. Last night when we were talking about abortion rights being healthcare, I lost my composure out of sheer terror about the possibility of a similar disaster with my cousin happening to our daughter and how I struggle to understand how he doesn't see the problem with his party and that in fact I think he is being willfully ignorant to the danger I and my daughter face in favor of his idea about making economics work for our family. I also said that if our daughter dies due to something preventable, like the ability to get a timely and much needed abortion, or gets shot to death in school, that I would let my own mother rot in a nursing home. She votes R2, and I'd never be able to look him in the face again, which would basically be me disappearing and divorcing him. I was crying and upset and explaining how scared I was, and he asked me in a very hurt manner if I'd actually abandon him like that. I am truthful to a fault and said that I would, perhaps out of a sense of illogical grief and betrayal, because I'd know my concerns were not taken seriously and that they had abandoned common sense and did nothing to attempt preventing a very real consequence of voting away mine and my daughter's right to health care. I equated it to a slow-motion car wreck with our daughter in mortal danger and him just watching it happen because it doesn't involve his own body. I know he needs to hear it. But I think I was too raw and open about it to steer the conversation in a healthy way, and I have a very blunt manner. I apologized this morning for saying that I'd leave him, even though I knew I would, and he tentatively accepted it. And I said we'd talk about things later when I can articulate things in a healthier way. But I'm at a loss as to how to make it known how deadly serious this is to me and not make him feel like I'd abandon our marriage over just any sensitive topic. I do not need people telling me to leave him. I don't think I know how to make it any more digestible and be clear without going nuclear over something that has not happened, as our daughter is too young to suffer that yet. The rub is that I am the person who is changing the dynamic of our relationship, and I'm beginning to understand how politics breaks up families. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Ask him to name scenarios that he would accept the premature death of his daughter. Ask him to name what life-saving healthcare he would be willing to deny for his daughter based on principles. If he can't name any, ask him why is abortion different. Use your cousin's story as a hypothetical for your daughter, but be as graphic with it as you can be. But in all honesty, if you must labor so much to convince him to care about yours and your daughter's health and well-being, then this should also serve as a wake-up call to you. And if I were you, I'd take back your apology. You meant what you said and only apologized to comfort him. I say let him be uncomfortable. Why are you so concerned with the bluntness of your words and not concerned about how quick he is to dismiss you? Comment 2. I'm the daughter of a Republican dad and liberal mom. I'm honestly not sure why they are still together, and think it is because they are older and retired. Luckily, I live in a liberal state that doesn't take away human rights, so I think it allows my mom not to think about it as much. It's been since Trump that I've really seen the division between them. I don't really have any advice to give you, but the perspective from a daughter in a similar type of situation. I love my dad, but I don't have a lot of respect for him because I don't think he actually understands what's going on. It hurts as a daughter to know my dad votes for a party that is actively doing bad to a lot of human rights mainly because he believes in the economics of Republicans. I also hate having to be around my parents in the evening, especially if they are watching the news. My mom definitely holds frustration for my dad and takes it out by saying mean things to him. And I feel like my dad doesn't take it seriously, because I don't think he actually understands how scary this is for certain people. I wish my parents would do therapy together. And honestly, you guys should probably do therapy together if you actually want to make your marriage work without resentment growing. Comment 3. The worst part is all these men talk about the economics of being a Republican, when all the data shows time and time again that those economics are absolutely horrible for 99.9% of us. They literally will cause harm to their families and others because they believe lies and don't want to hear otherwise. Comment 4. I understand why you don't want advice to leave him, but you may have to accept that as your reality simply because your morals, values, and ethics are no longer compatible. But of course, do everything you can to try to reach him. Obviously, deep down, you know him and know he has the potential. I went through this with my own husband years ago. And I wasn't nice about it. It was pretty much a deal breaker for me then, and now, and he was too busy being smugly libertarian on every other issue, so I had nothing to lose. That said, once he extracted his head from his rectum, I've been happy to explain things from my perspective as long as he's willing to actually listen. He's not perfect, but he gets a lot that men generally don't or take for granted. I do know that one of my big points was that his views meant I couldn't trust him. Women's reproductive rights sure don't affect men directly, but by not caring about the issue because they care about the women in their life, they are sending a clear message that women are interchangeable appliances. He either cares about the things that are important to you or he doesn't actually care about you. He can't claim to love and respect you and want a future with you if he's voting against your basic interests. That is hurtful for you, but you are allowing him to center his feelings hurt because you threaten to divorce him someday. He's hurting you now, but he wants to focus on his potential future pain that would be a direct consequence of his behavior now. Let that sink in. He is telling you exactly where you stand with him in multiple ways. Further, he's deluded if he thinks voting for Trump Republicans is going to actually be good for his finances. Maybe in the short term. The reality is that any gains he makes will be offset by the tax overhaul and tariff system. If your wealth is dependent on your income in any significant way, Trump winning would put your income at risk as women are forced out of the workplace and into a housewife role. If your income depends on either of you working overtime, Trump is giving employers a way to deny overtime premiums through creative scheduling. A lot of tax deductions and credits that primarily benefit low and middle class families are being eliminated while those that benefit the wealthiest are left intact or strengthened. We've already had a preview of his roided out trickle-down economy from his first term. Your husband is being incredibly short-sighted. Comment 5. I'm not sure what you are trying to achieve with this post. You say you don't need people telling you to leave him. However, the harsh reality is, in this situation, that is your present and your future, as long as you stick with Republican men. He is not a very good man when he puts your daughter's and every other woman's life at risk by voting for people who want nothing but destruction and power. That doesn't change, no matter how much you gaslight yourself that you can somehow fix him, or see reason. Sorry to be so blunt about it. Comment 6. This. If a man is a Republican, if he plans on voting for the GOP candidate, even if Trump keels over tomorrow and is replaced by someone who's less openly insane, if he is willfully ignorant, he is not a good man. Full stop. He can help old ladies cross the street and volunteer at a soup kitchen as a hobby, but he's still not a good man because he does not actually care about women. OP, you think you can fix your partner? You cannot. Nobody can fix another person. You can't be the person who is changing the dynamic of the relationship when you're not the bad actor. You should not have to explain why rolling back women's rights is fucked up to get someone to see that. He already knows and does not care. Update. We had a serious discussion. I went into more detail about my concerns and fears and it was intense. I was much better at presenting the case. I gave him several hypotheticals that involved a particularly gruesome set of circumstances involving his balls. I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty, but the gist was to shift his perspective. I told him to seriously consider carrying a tiny fetus in his ballsack and the fact that the risks were things like exploding balls, sepsis, etc., and the myriad of ways he could end up dead, permanently physically injured and disfigured, or unable to produce a fetus in the future if he didn't have the option of removing the fetus from his balls. I asked him if he would even want to take the risk and he agreed that he'd be very likely to remove it unless he was ready for those risks. I asked him why in the world would I be justified in telling him he has to carry it no matter what and it might only be removed after it starts to explode out of his ballsack or his organs start shutting down. Once he seemed to start grasping the enormity of what abortion encompasses and seeing why it's very important to not let unknown people control what options you have with no medical reason. I told him I lost a bit of respect for willful ignorance, and that I can tell he avoided thinking about it. He knows in some way that it says something about his character. And I resented having to even give him a hypothetical in the first place, and that if he cares for me and our daughter that he should automatically actively be using his empathy skills every day. I explained how I have demonstrated the capacity to care about and evaluate gender issues he's brought to my attention in the past. That was a difficult part of the conversation. I also told him that I do not trust him to always make good decisions for us and that I feel alone in shouldering those responsibilities. He listened and let me talk a lot. He asked if I was going to leave him and he was clearly nervous and bracing for the worst. I told him I'm not taking drastic steps like that, but I certainly will when it comes to keeping our daughter healthy and safe. I also started to say something about how I know I would lie to him in a heartbeat in a situation where our daughter needed an abortion or medical care, and he interrupted me to say, "You wouldn't have to lie because I'll be driving the car or buying the plane tickets and we will all go anywhere we need to." Y'all, I burst into tears. We ended the conversation and he said I laid a lot on him and he needed a break but said he had things to think about. I didn't push any more politics, but I think I feel like my trust has been slightly restored. I'm not getting my hopes up, but I think he realizes that he's wading in dark and dangerous waters when it comes to our futures. Relevant comments. Comment 1. All of this reminds me so much of that scene in the show The Handmaid's Tale where June finds out that she's not allowed to access her bank account anymore and that her husband has to sign something for her to get birth control pills, and her husband dismisses her concerns, basically saying, "That's okay. I'll take care of you. No big deal, it's fine." It's easy to dismiss a concern when that concern doesn't seem to affect you directly. And the problem is that no matter what we say, no matter what example we give, some people will always have a degree of removal from an issue that can affect their understanding and their empathy. My own husband is empathetic and caring. But he doesn't understand why I, someone staring down the barrel of menopause, is so angry about abortion access restrictions. He doesn't understand why I, a woman in a loving marriage that doesn't look likely to end anytime soon, is upset about the end of no-fault divorce. Or why I, as someone with no connection to prison, is upset about our horribly inequitable carceral system. And he will say he understands my objections, but then he's like, why bother wasting energy getting upset about it? I don't know how to get across to him that just because it doesn't apply to me or us right now doesn't mean it won't later. I also don't know how to get across to him that it's very difficult to see attacks on our ability to get a divorce or access an abortion as a direct slap against me as a woman. If someone punches someone else like me in the face while staring me directly in the eye to show me that they would be doing it to me if they could, that's very upsetting. But they aren't looking him in the eye, so he doesn't see it that way. Comment 2. I admire the heck out of you for having this huge conversation with your husband. Thank you for making the case for all of us. And thanks for sharing with us. I hope your example can help others who need to have serious discussions like this with people in their lives. Comment 3. I'm glad you have this talk and that he is starting to reconsider his decisions. But I hope you are very clear with him that this isn't about him setting aside his views for the special case of you and his daughter. Other women are entitled to the same respect and autonomy that he wants for his daughter. If his position is that he will pack the bags and buy the tickets for y'all, but he will nonetheless continue to vote for all other women to be oppressed, he's not a good man. OP. We talked about the women getting turned away from emergency rooms across the country because they were having pregnancy complications for babies they likely wanted to keep, and it was like I could see a gear start cranking in his head. Total silence, like he'd never considered that a lot of women who seek emergency abortions actually wanted their babies. Comment 4. My husband and I had this discussion before our first was born. This was before Roe v. Wade was overturned, but the writing was on the wall that it might go. We live in a very HCOL city for my job, but things weren't going well, and we were debating moving. I told him that as long as kids were on the table, moving to a red state was out of the question. I refused to move to a place where I would not be able to get access to care that I needed and end up dead just because we were trying to have a child. My husband brushed it off. One of his close family members is one of the most prominent OBGYNs in the country. He said that, when the worst came to worst, she would help us out. But I said, how exactly? Imagine I'm suffering from sepsis and about to die, and the hospital I'm in literally will not perform an abortion. What exactly will she do? And he stopped in his tracks. That ended the discussion right there. My husband had simply never had to consider it before. At the time, we weren't seriously thinking about kids, so he hadn't really thought it through. In any case, in a few short years, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and I ended up pregnant with our first child. I'm currently pregnant with our second. We still have regular discussions about potentially moving. Never once subsequently has he ever considered a red state. Comment 5. So glad he finally understood the reason why we need to vote the way we do to protect our bodies. But is he going to back up what he says he now understands by voting the opposite of what he's done before? Comment 6. I hate that many men only recognize women's bodily autonomy when they become fathers. I hope you really talk to him about voting Republican this year, otherwise this whole thing is really moot. Comment 7. I'm glad he understood, but he still votes Republican. The Democratic Party is still right-wing. No, they are not leftist unless you're talking about the progressives, but your husband deliberately chose to vote for the more racist, ableist, sexist, bigoted in every way party. The only reason you had this discussion is because it affects you and your daughter on the basis of gender and sex. I'm not going to tell you to get a divorce, but you should probably take a good look at your own morals and principles if you still think it's okay for him to vote the way he does. Especially given everything that has happened since 2016. Editor's note, OP seems satisfied with her discussion with her husband, whether you disagree or not, so is unlikely to update. Therefore, I have marked this conclusion. Weird guy shows up at my parents' house at 1 a.m. looking for me using details from 20 years ago. Help me figure out this mystery. Posted this on the Creepy Encounter sub and someone suggested I post here. This happened 3 nights ago and I'm going crazy trying to figure it out. I just moved into a new apartment 1 month ago and I'm still unpacking and settling in. I have been using my parents' address as my mailing address, who live a few towns over, 20 minutes away, all of my life. 3 nights ago my parents called me at 2 a.m. and freaked out and proceeded to tell me this story. Apparently at 1 a.m. someone starts banging on their front door and repeatedly ringing their doorbell. My stepdad walks downstairs and opens the door, leaving the front glass door closed and locked. There was a man standing outside, who looked to be in his 30s, with a black hoodie on with the hood pulled up around his face. He didn't have any distinguishing facial features, facial hair or tattoos. The only thing my stepdad said was that he looked to be Hispanic. Neither my stepdad or my mother, who was watching the whole thing out a window, recognized the man. The man says, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for my full name." My stepdad plays dumb and says, "Who?" The man proceeds to state my full name again and says that my boyfriend is worried because I didn't come home that night. He claims to be a friend of my boyfriend and tells my stepdad that they are both out looking for me, worried because I didn't show up at home. I don't have a boyfriend. I live by myself with my 3 dogs and haven't been in a relationship in the past 5-6 months. Here's the weird part. My stepdad asked the guy what boyfriend he was talking about and the man told him the name of the boyfriend I had when I was in 10th grade, nearly 20 years ago. My boyfriend in 10th grade has a very, very unique Italian name. I've never met anyone with a full name even close to his. He says my high school boyfriend's name a few more times to ensure my stepdad heard him and repeats that they are very worried about me. Is my stepdad sure I'm not inside? At this point my stepdad is weirded out and closes and locks the door in his face. The man does not leave. He lingers in front of my parents' house for the next 10 minutes, smoking cigarettes and talking on the phone. Finally, my parents called the cops. About 5 minutes before the cops arrive, The man walks down to the dead end on their block and drives away in a silver car. Stepdad was unable to get the license plate. My parents file a police report and nothing else happens. After I hear this story, I am going nuts over the weird details. How would someone know who I dated nearly 20 years ago, and what would the motive be of making up a story that included that weird detail about my past? I have not had contact with a 10th grade boyfriend in over a decade. Yesterday, I decided to message him on Facebook to see if he has any insight. I tell him the whole story. He's just as confused as I am and claims to have no part in it. I am at a loss. I'm also really freaked out that some strange man is going through that much trouble at 1 a.m. to look for me. Any insights or ideas would be greatly appreciated. No, nothing else weird has happened since then. Update 1. Wow, this really blew up. Thank you so much for all the kind words and precautions that I should take. I want to add something here that a few people commented on, that might shine some light on this mystery. First off, I am not in any legal trouble and have no reason to think someone would be suing me. God, I guess it's always in the realm of possibility that I'm being sued by someone, but I really don't think that's it. Like I previously commented, I had an expired registration ticket that I did not show up to court for, but I believe I got a letter in the mail just asking me to pay a really large fee, so I don't think that's related. I did take a personal loan out. Took it out about a year and a half ago. It wasn't anything too crazy and I was really good with making payments on time until about 6 months ago when I had a medical issue. Currently, I am really behind on payments, but to my knowledge, I have not defaulted on the loan yet. What do you guys think? Related? I had absolutely no idea that this is a thing, or I would have included this detail to begin with. Let me know your thoughts. Update 2. I have a list of a few things that I am going to look into tomorrow, based on my own thoughts and based on a ton of valuable feedback I got in here. Thank you. We'll post an update ASAP. Update 3. I'm so sorry it's taken me so long to update. It's a super busy time at work. Unfortunately, there isn't much to report. I called the loan company. They claim to have nothing to do with it. All of my friends and family also noted that the 1 a.m. factor kind of rules that out anyway. Nothing else strange has happened to my parents. I went there for the first time last night and kept a close eye out for anything, didn't observe anything out of the norm. So this remains a mystery. I'll be sure to update if something else happens. Final update. Alright, 1 year later I finally have an update to this insane mystery. I will include the original story here first, followed by the update. After this happened, my family and a couple of my close friends have been talking about this mystery in depth to try and put our heads together to figure it out. We all have our own theories, but ultimately no definitive answer as to what happened or who this creeper was. So we pretty much put it to rest and only continued to joke about it once in a while. Here's the update. My stepsister, my stepdad's daughter, and her fiancé were at a house party right after the holidays, around early January of this year. While they were there, they started talking to a girl that neither of them knew. After some time talking together, the girl started talking about her ex-boyfriend and how they were going through a really tough time together. They had just recently broken up and she felt really bad because he was a wreck over it. Somehow it came up that this girl's ex-boyfriend was my 10th grade boyfriend, the one with the really unique Italian name. The whole situation wasn't that big of a coincidence, since I went to high school with my stepsister's fiancé and we have a lot of mutual friends. So it makes sense that they were at a party that would include some people I went to high school with. As soon as my stepsister and her fiancé hear this, they both start freaking out, and without revealing too many details, they tell the girl about the whole mystery and how weird it was. As they are telling the story, the girl's face starts to go white and she looks like she's about to cry. My stepsister and fiancé try to console her and ask her what's wrong. The wine beer had been flowing at this point, so I'm sure everyone was a little tipsy. The girl starts to tell them that a few nights ago, she was sleeping, and someone started banging on her door at, get this, fucking 1 a.m., just like what happened to me at my parents'. The girl jumps out of bed and says she was absolutely terrified by how loud and aggressive someone was banging on her door. She said she literally thought it was going to break in. The girl has a Ring camera, so looks at her phone. There on the camera is a guy in a black hoodie, banging on her door. She obviously pretends like she isn't home and keeps all of the lights off. He continues banging. As she is getting ready to dial 911, the guy stops and leaves. She said she was absolutely terrified. For whatever reason, she didn't end up calling the cops, but may have gone to stay with a friend that night or the night after. My stepsister and fiancé are shocked by the details and how similar it is to my story, especially because of the mutual ex-boyfriend we share, except this girl literally just broke things off with him. They asked the girl if she has any idea who the guy is and she said no, but that it definitely is not the actual ex-boyfriend. She said this guy was much taller and heavier than our shared mutual ex. How fucking weird. This mystery is still unsolved and these new details honestly just make my head spin even more. No one else has shown up to my parents' door since the actual incident a year ago. OP added extra info in the comments. So a few answers to some questions. My 10th grade boyfriend was into drugs when I dated him back in high school. No idea if he continued to use throughout his life or not, but can confirm he is definitely an addict who may or may not be in recovery currently. My 10th grade boyfriend has been to my parents' house multiple times. My parents still live in the same house I grew up in, and my 10th grade boyfriend has been over many times while we dated in high school. I don't know where he currently lives, but he grew up about 10 minutes away from my parents' house. My 10th grade boyfriend and I had a horrific breakup. I met my high school sweetheart while I was dating him and broke up with him in a pretty messed up way. He held a grudge over it all throughout high school and was extremely nasty to me to the point of bullying. At one point, I had to get a security guard to escort me to classes because him and his friends were bullying me so badly. The bullying was only severe for the rest of 10th grade, but he definitely hated me all throughout high school. At one point he did end up apologizing to me, and explained that he was just heartbroken over me breaking up with him, but at that point, I was way past the point of forgiving him. After graduating high school, we ran into each other maybe once or twice while I was home from college and he was totally cordial and nice with me and we laughed the high school experiences off. I can definitely try reaching out to him on Facebook again and bringing back up this whole mystery with the added updates from his recent ex-girlfriend to see what his reaction is and gauge whether or not he's being truthful in it. I can also ask some mutual high school friends who know him about how he currently is, if he's into any shady shit or not. My stepsister only gave me a first name and description of a recent ex-girlfriend from the party. But I can go on my 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look for her under his friends, then reach out to her on Facebook Messenger to inquire about ring footage and ask her more questions, also see if she ever reached out to cops. I agree this is probably the best thing to do if I want more answers, but I agree I need to be careful as I still don't know what is going on here. My 10th grade boyfriend does not have a brother, just one younger sister that I remember back from high school. Relevant comments from OP Comment 1. I just posted some answers in the comments about the nature of my breakup with my high school boyfriend and how horrific it was and how he basically harassed me for the rest of the 10th grade. Your last theory, and what a lot of other people are commenting on, is starting to make the most sense to me. It could be that my 10th grade boyfriend has a tendency to get insanely hung up on girls and is sending a close friend or relative to do these 1 a.m. drop-bys. And this would especially make sense if he is still using drugs like he did in high school. This theory being correct would mean he lied to me when I reached out to him on Facebook a year ago, which of course he would. If this is the case, it seems like he moved on to his current ex. I just hope he doesn't swing back around to me. Comment 2. I decided I'm going to try and find out the girl's full name so I can look her up on social media. I may even be able to find her with just the first name that I already know from my steps. I can go onto my 10th grade boyfriend's Facebook and look in his friend list for a girl with the same first name who looks like she could have been his ex-girlfriend. He may even have pictures with her tagged, so it shouldn't be that hard, unless he wiped his social media clean of her after they broke up. When I'm able to find her, I'm going to reach out to her and try and get some answers. I think this is the safest route since I still don't know my 10th grade boyfriend's role in this and I did already ask him once and he claimed to have no part in it or know anything, which may or may not have been a lie. Based on how scared my stepson said this girl was, I'm betting she'll be willing to talk to me about it since we share the experience. I will make an update post when I have more info. Thanks everyone. My ex-husband left when I was pregnant with twins. Now, he suspects I cheated and demands a paternity test for my children. My ex-husband and I have 3 children. It was a difficult split as he left while I was pregnant with our twins and he tried to make everything as difficult as possible. He and his wife are wanting me to do a paternity test on the children as they are disputing that our youngest is his and he no longer wants to pay child support for her. Him wanting to reduce his child support has been an ongoing issue. For the last 5 years, he hasn't had a problem regarding the paternity of any of our children. He's now stating that he doesn't think that our daughter is his and that I have cheated because she doesn't look like him. She doesn't look much like me either, she's got green eyes like I do. Both of us are pale with light-colored hair and eyes. Our daughter has dark hair that is thick and curly. She looks mixed race and she's the only one who looks this way. Her twin brother looks like my ex-husband. My daughter looks like my grandmother who was mixed race and was white passing. I'll be honest that he and his wife do not get along. I mean, it is hard to get along with the woman who your husband left you for. She keeps trying to shove herself in my children's lives and acting like their mom. She keeps insisting that she's mama, and they should refer to her as that, They have refused to call her that, which always ends at my ex calling me frustrated that the children won't give her respect. She's recently been pointing out that my youngest looks darker than her siblings and has been suggesting that my youngest isn't my ex-husband's. I'm close with my former ex's brother's wife, and she told me before my ex did that he wanted a paternity test and was going to stop paying child support for her. She's also said that ex and his wife are once again having money issues. This was something I had already suspected, as he had stopped taking them on his weekends as he was having to work overtime. Before people tell me to document this, I have everything documented. I refuse to answer calls from him, which forces him to either text or email me so that I can keep conversation records, as I don't trust him. After I found out about him wanting a paternity test, I told him that I wasn't going to consent to him doing a paternity test on the children, and the only way he was getting one is if he took me to court. He told me that it was clear our daughter wasn't his and that she didn't look like her siblings. He argued that he couldn't afford court and I was holding his money hostage by forcing him to pay for a child who isn't his. He has now apparently been whining about me on Facebook about how I cheated on him and am forcing him to raise another man's child and forced him to sign the birth certificate. I didn't, he wasn't even there, but as we were still married I could put him on without him being there. I don't follow him. I had one of his friends try and confront me about it. I want my children to have a relationship with their dad, and I feel like this is stopping them. Though on the other hand, I know there will be something else he, or his wife, takes issue with down the line. AITA for refusing to do a paternity test. Edit. I thought I'd put this in my post, but I didn't. Really should have proofread this rather than posting in anger. My ex wants me to pay for the paternity test. He doesn't want to because of his financial situation, which is why I told him to take it to court and get a court-mandated one. I know if I was to pay for it, then he would want another one because he'll think that I tampered with it as I paid for it. He did the same when I had the house valued so I could give him half. He didn't like what the first person valued it at, so had to get another. I know I haven't cheated on him and she is his. I know some didn't like me referring to her as my youngest. Both her and her brother don't like being referred to as twins or as one, so I don't refer to them as such. Since they were toddlers they have been very independent from each other and want to be treated as such. She is not my only daughter. My eldest is also a girl. Update. So I did not expect so many comments on my last post. After I posted in my frustration over the paternity test situation, my ex-husband, we'll call him Jim, and his wife kept trying to get me to consent to and pay for the paternity test. I refused to pay because I know Jim, when the result isn't what he wants, he will accuse me of tampering with the results. When I kept saying no, they ran to whoever would listen, complaining about me and how I was forcing them to pay for a child that wasn't Jim's. For those who may not have read my last post, the child in question is my youngest daughter and a twin. Jim does not contest that her twin brother is his. But apparently, along with being a bitch over this, I'm also a cat. News to me. Honestly, I didn't think he was that much of an idiot, but here we are. Jim kept complaining to his dad, Mick, and brother about me and how I was being financially abusive by taking money from him for a child that wasn't his and refusing to pay for the paternity test. Now Mick and I get on very well. He adores his grandchildren. They also adore him. And I have never attempted to stop them having a relationship, unlike Jim, who often attempts to weaponize the children. I get on very well with Jim's family and we are close. His brother's wife, and I are very close. She's the sister I never had, only child problems. Mick asked if he was to pay for a paternity test, if I would allow it to happen. Mick explained that he wasn't accusing me of anything, but he was fed up with seeing Jim and his wife drag me every chance they got. He understood why I was refusing and agreed with me. I agreed, but stated that Jim should choose the company that the paternity test is done through, and I didn't want to know which one was chosen. That way I wasn't involved. So we had the paternity test. Mick paid for all 3 children to be tested and had them tested with the private company Jim chose and then a private company Mick's lawyer recommended. Mick explained he did this so that if Jim started arguing against the results, calling them fake, then Mick had another set to back them up. And what do you know, all 3 children are Jim's. Since we've gotten the results, Jim has tried arguing that they're wrong and that youngest definitely isn't his. He has also been taking to Facebook to complain about me and is threatening to take me to court for fraud. The man couldn't afford to pay for a paternity test. He definitely can't afford a lawyer to take me to court, but I'd like to see him try. Former SIL has been screenshotting some of his comments and sending them over to me, which we've been having a giggle over, especially since one of the things Jim has whining about is finding out I've been dating a former friend of his. I say former because he, along with some others, were cut out by Jim's wife. Jim's upset because I'm alienating him from the children by dating someone new, coming from the man who left me when I was pregnant for his now wife, who keeps trying to insist she is mama to my children. My children only met my boyfriend for the first time this weekend, after we had been dating for a year. Before people jump to Jim's defense and claim I'm alienating him, I've never stopped him seeing or communicating with the children. He's the one that decides when he's interested in being their dad. So yeah, unsurprisingly my children are Jim's. Jim's still an idiot. The children are happy as they're off to have a sleepover at their granddad's with cousins, while I get to have wine and spend the evening catching up with former Sil. Jim and his wife are still mouthing off on social media, but it's falling on deaf ears for the most part. Relevant comments. Comment 1, he left when you were pregnant with twins but doesn't believe the youngest is his. I didn't read past that because that doesn't make sense to me. Wouldn't the twins then be the youngest? OP, that's correct. She is the younger of my twins. Comment 2, so he thinks only one of the twins isn't his? OP, yep, he only thinks one of the twins is his. I wish I could explain why he thinks that, but he was never the smartest. My husband is a doctor. Am I the asshole for wanting him to be by my side holding my hand during childbirth instead of delivering our baby? I originally posted this in Am I the Asshole, and it was removed. I can't see any of the comments now. I, 35, am 7 months pregnant. I am married to a family medicine doctor, 35, and we've been together for 10 years. This is a throwaway account on Reddit because my sister-in-law follows me on Reddit and reports everything to my husband. I'm reaching out to all of you to ask for advice on a fight my husband and I are having about our birth plan. My husband really wants to deliver the baby, which I can kind of understand. It's not uncommon for doctors to deliver their own child. There is still an obstetrician-gynecologist there, monitoring everything. And the doctor father steps in at the last minute as the mother is crowning to just catch the baby. My husband has, I guess, always dreamed of being the one to pull the baby out, while I pictured it very differently. I thought he would be up by my head, holding my hand and helping me through it. He says he will do that, but the easiest part is the very end where I won't need him anyway. He said if I really want someone there, his mom can step in. I've been on my own since I was a kid living in my car, so I don't have anyone I'd want in there with me except him. I don't really even want his mom in there. She's great, but he's my person. I know it would be cool for him to deliver our baby, but I really feel like I need him there. I personally didn't want our doctors to know he was a doctor because as soon as any of my doctors, or even our veterinarian, finds out he's a doctor, they talk exclusively to him. I don't even want him to go to the prenatal appointments anymore because no one talks to me. They all talk to him, and I can't ask my questions to anyone but my husband at home. But he's already told everyone he'll be delivering his first baby. I guess I don't want this because I wanted him to be there as a husband and a father and not a doctor. I see him as a doctor 95% of the time, and I wanted to experience this with my husband and not my husband the doctor. I wanted him to be there for me as this is my first birth and I'm terrified. He just keeps telling me I'll be fine. He pulled in friends and family who also don't understand my point of view. They said this is his first child too and to just let him have this since I had the honor of being pregnant. I just really wanted him to hold my hand all the way through it and be able to share this experience as parents and people instead of a medical professional. I was hoping we could see the baby at the same time and just be equals in this. Am I being selfish for wanting this to be my way? Relevant comments, from all subreddits. Commenter. He pulled in friends family who also don't understand my POV. They said this is his first child too and to just let him have this since I had the honor of being pregnant. Who are these people? And why does everyone defer to your husband this way? Your request is totally reasonable and your husband's lack of understanding is pretty glaring. NTAOP, his mom, sisters, and our really close friends that I guess are technically more his friends than mine. I haven't brought it up to my friends because I'm just not comfortable having our friends weigh into our relationship the way he is. I think his mom just likes his plan because it pulls her into the room which I attempted to veto early on. I do love her so much, but I wanted this to be our experience. Commenter, downvoted, NTA. But you both have visions of how your baby will be born, so you need to talk it out. Chances are the very last part of the birth you are not going to be holding hands. He is going to be with you in the delivery room either way, but this is something the two of you need to resolve. It's not enough to say I want. Find a compromise. For example, if he holds your hand the entire time you're in labor and only steps in as doctor for a few minutes of actual birth, wouldn't you both have a win? Focus on having a healthy baby and creating a happy family instead of on scenes you've created in your imagination. And that applies to both of you. OP, I don't see that as a compromise. That's exactly what he wants to have happen. But the entire birthing process is incredibly emotional and exhausting. I don't want him to step away for those moments because they are what I picture to be the most painful and exhausting. I want him with me until the baby is out and we can hold her. I don't want to be abandoned during my birth while he and the other doctors catch the baby and begin the baby's workup. He's going to deliver the baby and hold the baby all while I won't be able to see anything because my legs will be in the air. I'll miss my husband holding and seeing my baby for the first time, and I'll feel completely by myself and like I'm missing out on those crucial first moments. Maybe you're not a woman. But nothing sounds worse to me than having my legs in the stirrups, immediately post-birth with a sheet draped over my legs where I can't see my husband or baby meeting for the first time. Commenter, deleted, downvoted. I think you're overestimating what your attention span will be like in those moments. My mom let my dad catch both of their babies, and she told me that when she was doing those final pushes, she didn't care where my dad was. All she wanted was to get the baby out. She also said it meant a lot to see the joy on my dad's face, and having him hand her the baby instead of some random doctor or nurse made the bonding process more special. I'm not telling you this to change your mind. I'm just giving you an idea of what that moment could be like. OP, I just don't see it playing out that way. If he is there to catch the baby, he's going to want to start doing some of the exams, and we're already having so much trouble getting the doctors to talk to me and keep me informed. It just feels like another link I'll lose to the situation to actually be kept up to date and prioritized in the moment. I know that sounds really silly, but I've been sitting in on my ultrasound appointments and prenatal appointments, and they are focused on the belly, but not on me. Pretty much everyone talks exclusively to my husband. It's been a huge challenge to feel like I'm a part of it and not just coincidentally caring for the baby. Commenter, tell him that you've had to do everything by yourself your whole life already. This is not one of the things you can do by yourself, and you want him there when it comes out. You just want support once from the start to finish. It's lonely always having to take yourself places, to teach yourself, entertain yourself, and so on. And it's exhausting. Especially growing up like that your whole childhood, knowing people can just up and leave. Maybe tell him you're feeling so effing lonely, that you just want him to be there. If he doesn't understand, you may as well do this by yourself again. Surely the nurse can tell him to stay with you, and now is not the right time, Mr. Doctor, sir. Oh, and it's out. Sorry, congratulations your parents. OP, I'm going through so many comments, but I stopped and read yours 50 times and it hit me really hard. This is it, this is why I feel the way I do. Thank you so much. Thank you. Update comment 1. Not sure the right way to update. Posting it here as well. Update. I am going to confront him tonight when he gets home. He's already going to be upset because we both have restrictions on how much time we spend on social media sites, and I have significantly surpassed that today and yesterday, which he'll know as soon as he reviews the router logs. I'm hopeful I can catch him before that makes him too upset. I did reach out to some of our mutual friends just to see what he has told them for why this is so important to him, only to learn he never discussed this with them. I think he made up what he has been saying. They were really shocked to learn we've been having this disagreement and were actually quite supportive of an expectant mother controlling her birth plan. I'm quite nervous about his reaction to this as well, and I'd like to get ahead of this. Wish me luck and cross your fingers for me. Update comment 2. I first want to say, thank you. Thank you every single one of you who took the time to reply, send messages, check up on me, send me messages, and share your stories. I've read so much more than I'll ever be able to respond to. Thank you. Those who took the time to share resources and volunteer your own time, you're angels in the flesh. Thank you. I'm so incredibly touched by this overwhelming outpour of love and support. Also, thank you to even the people who told me I was selfish or crazy or any other derogative you chose to use. I'm not sure what helped me more, the people posing such great questions about if I felt safe, comfortable, loved, or the people telling me I was the terrible person. Something about attempting to reread my story as an outsider and seeing the comments where Redditors told me I was in fact the problem broke something in me, and I finally saw through the haze. But hey, maybe try to be nicer to strangers on the internet and consider your words more carefully. We're all people trying to get through life. So many of you are kind, caring, and loving individuals. Thank you for caring about some random things on the internet. I don't even have words. I can't say a whole lot about these last few days. So much has happened that I will be processing for years to come. All I can say is I am safe and I am free. Read into that as you will. My next steps are leaving this chapter of my life behind. I'm moving out of this city and I'm going to try starting again somewhere new. Somewhere beautiful where every time I look outside, it's hard to believe it's real life. I've always felt drawn to the mountains with all of their beauty and might. I don't plan to ever log into this account, or even Reddit, ever again. I did the same thing at 16, and I'm hopeful these last few decades have set me up for more success than I had the first time chasing a new start. If you read my story, and you relate to it in any way, or you too feel smothered, voiceless, and alone every single day locked in the house with someone who is supposed to love you, I just want you to know what I now know. That isn't normal. That isn't what life is supposed to be. There are people you can rely on, and strangers can be your best friend. The cost may be steep, but the cost to stay is so much more. Farm this post for all of the comments and support available. I pass it on to you and beg you to use what resources you can find. The sheer volume of personal messages I received from people in the same boat, people sharing support, people checking in to make sure I was okay. There's such a community here, and they will help you before you even realize you need it. I'm not sure what's next, and that's terrifying but also refreshing. I haven't had that in so many years. I discovered my SO of 3 years was texting back and forth with another person every day and was sending nude photos to each other. A little bit of backstory. SO and I have been together for 4 years, and about 2 years ago when the Rona hit, I moved in with him as we both lost our respective jobs and needed to save a bit from gas and utilities. Since then I have found a new office job and SO takes some odd jobs online, but he basically stays at home most of the time. SO has always been on the controlling side. He wanted me to cut all my male friends from my life. Hindsight is 20/20, I know, but in his defense, he also cut all contacts with women, or at least to my knowledge. SO has always been very adamant that he doesn't condone cheating, and even if someone else in his life was a cheater, he would cut them out of his life. The relationship has had its ups and downs. We have had a fair share of arguments, and a few months ago we hit a rough patch, but recently things were looking okay for a while. Or so I thought. SO has become quite guarded with his phone lately, including hiding it if I look over his shoulder. He has never done this before, and it's very not like him. I am very open with my personal tech items. He's always welcome to look through my phone and laptop because I have nothing to hide. We even know each other's phone passwords. My gut feeling kept telling me that something was wrong, so when I got up for work this morning while he was still sleeping, I admit, I shouldn't have done what I did. I took his phone from the nightstand and checked out his conversations. SO has been chatting with a girl he met online, 25. I only skimmed through the last few messages as I didn't want him to wake up and catch me snooping, but they have been texting back and forth every day while I was at work and sending each other nudes. I was so shaken and disgusted. I don't know when it all started, but I assume it's been at least a month because that's when I first noticed the suspicious phone guarding behavior. Honestly, no matter how much I look for a solution, there's no coming back from this. I know I have to leave. I haven't confronted him yet because I don't want him to try and persuade me to stay or spin it that it's my fault. I also don't believe in closure, so there's really no use in telling him that I know. Here's where I need advice. I have a place to move to and I have to move all my stuff. I don't want to have him damage my stuff to spite me or something. He has a history of throwing my possessions when angry, so I'll have people come help me move when he's not in the house. We have separate finances, so that's not an issue. The problem is, we have a dog. I adopted him with his approval when I moved in with him. I'm saying it's technically my dog since I do 90% of the dog activities. He rarely takes him out and I buy all the dog toys and dog food. Basically, he's the fun parent that gets only the pets and hugs. I know he loves the dog and the dog loves him, but I don't think he'd be able to take care of him and get up at 6 a.m. to walk him. My baby is also too used to the house and us, and he'll probably be stressed out if I move him. Should I take the dog with me without telling my soon-to-be ex, or should I leave the dog with him? Another thing I need advice for is, should I leave him a note or a message with any explanation? Update 1. First, I'd like to thank everyone who commented on my previous post. It really helped put things in perspective for me. A few people asked for an update. It will be a lengthy one, so brace yourselves. One particular comment stuck out to me, that my pet doesn't know what's best for them and they could roll in literal shit and be happy, which really solidified my decision. As a preface, I'd like to apologize. I was paranoid that I could be found out, so I altered a couple of details in the original, one of which was that we owned a cat, not a dog. However, I was still doing 90% of the caring for the cat. On to the update. After reading all the comments and making the decision to take the cat, I called my best friend, her boyfriend and my parents to tell them I'm breaking up and discuss logistics. I also told them to not mention anything in writing on the off chances that SO sees the messages. It took me quite some time to put everything in motion, 3 weeks to be precise, in which time I was doing my best to act like everything was okay while secretly moving some of my stuff to my parents' place to ease the final load. Finally, last Friday morning, my best friend, her boyfriend and my dad came. We loaded up everything on my father's truck and left. The whole ordeal took 1.5 HRS. I was honestly amazed how much stuff I managed to accumulate for just 2 years. I took everything that I paid for out of my pocket, including a monitor and a headset that I lent him due to his equipment breaking and he never bought new ones. The only thing I left was a queen-size bed I bought shortly after moving in. I also made sure to log into X's World of Warcraft account to cancel his subscription, which was paid from my bank account. I left a note on his desk that basically said, "Do not panic, you have not been robbed." I just took all my stuff and left. I'm taking the cat with me because I don't trust you to take care of her properly. Do not call me, my friends or my family. We have already had the talk, so there's nothing else to say. Have a nice life, your ex. I didn't tell him I knew about the cheating because at this point it was irrelevant. In retrospect, it was just the last straw on top of many other problems. But hindsight is always 20/20. I blocked his number and never looked back. Sure enough, he messaged me on WhatsApp as soon as he came back to the empty flat. The gist of the messages was that we could have done it the Civil War, LMAO, and why did I take the cat this way, we raised her together and he loved her. He also tried to call 3 times but gave up soon after. I then blocked him on WhatsApp as well. The next few days were pretty uneventful. Yesterday, he showed up at my workplace unannounced. I was pretty annoyed but didn't want to make a scene in front of the colleges, so I took a break and went out with him to the park across the street. Knowing him, he wouldn't just fuck off and leave me alone. He said he wanted closure and that I owed it to him after all these years. The conversation was mostly boring, so I'll highlight the important details. He said he wanted his monitor back and that he's willing to pay for it or trade me his new one, which is better, but wasn't with the same curvature that he was used to. I told him that I like my monitor and tough luck. The best part is he went out, bought a new monitor, set it up to play WoW but realized that I also took the headset. He then asked his mother to buy him one and she bought headphones without a mic. Pity. He asked to have the cat back. He offered me money, offered me all his crypto savings and even offered me 60k gold in WoW LMAO. I told him some things can't be bought with money. He then asked to co-parent and when I said no to that too, he asked to at least say goodbye to her in person, also denied. I brought up that I'm the cat's primary caregiver and he can't even clean her shit. He replied he could, when push comes to shove, but didn't since I was doing those things anyway, despite him being in the flat almost 24/7. I also pointed out that if he really loved the cat that much, he'd want the best for her and to be with the one who takes care of her, instead of wanting to keep her for selfish reasons. He kind of agreed on that. The most baffling part, he offered to pay me to go grocery shopping together. We used to do that all the time when we were together. I pointed him to a couple of sites where he can buy groceries and have them delivered. He said it was too much work. I told him to adjust and evolve. He also apologized one too many times for hurting me, to which I replied every time I wasn't hurt, I was just disgusted and cringed at the conversations I read, to which he got offended and mumbled that it was private, you know. Not once did he mention the side chick, even then he didn't have the balls to admit to the affair. In their messages there was a recurring joke that if he comes to the hotel where she works, they'd have to fuck in the janitor's room. I brought her up a couple of times, told him I wish them both the very best and since I left him the bed, he doesn't have to worry about fucking in the janitor's room anymore. He asked to be friends multiple times. I told him, also multiple times, he betrayed me and he's a pathological liar and I don't want to be friends with a dishonest person. He legit couldn't comprehend how his dishonesty impacts a potential friendship. He said he wanted to tell me he wasn't committed to me anymore but couldn't bring himself to do that. I pointed out the hypocrisy of him blowing up at me for platonically talking to male friends online but he cheats the moment a semi-attractive woman comes his way. He said that a woman cheating on a man is the greatest sin but a man cheating on a woman is not so severe. What the actual fuck? The rest of the conversation was him trying to play buddy-buddy and talk to me about his life and me reminding him that I'm not interested in his life and that he's a closed chapter to me. After what seemed to be eternity, we said our, hopefully, final goodbyes and I went back to work. In conclusion, for the past week since I left, I've felt like a huge load have dropped off my shoulders. I have all the time in the world, I'm working on myself, I'm reconnecting with people I haven't talked to in years. I'm trying to live my best life and I don't regret anything. There were good times, there were bad times. It was a valuable experience and a lesson learned what to look for in a partner and, more importantly, what not to overlook. Huge thanks to everyone that commented on my post. You really gave me the push I needed to make what I hope is the right decision. Update 2. I was contemplating whether to write this last update or not. A bunch of things have happened since I last posted and eventually, I figured we are all more or less people who laugh at their own farts and enjoy the occasional justice boner, so I decided y'all might appreciate how karma has caught up with X. Disclaimer and some background. I left out a lot of information in the original post and altered a lot of details to make sure X does not find the post and connect the dots. Our real ages are 28, him, 33, me, and 34, side chick. X and I were together for almost 7 years. Note 4. X had a chronic disease. Nothing fatal if treated, very manageable, and a lot of people with the condition can work. He was of course using it as an excuse not to work, even online work, and mooch off me. We lived with his mother, who was supporting his narrative that he is too sick to work. X was abusive, first only verbally, but it progressed to physical abuse. I omitted most of this information in the first post because I wanted an unbiased opinion whether to take the cat or not. Even though the cheating was the last nail in the coffin of our relationship, I was actually contemplating leaving him for almost a year before the actual fact, and on occasions where he ramped up the abuse. I will withhold giving examples for the time being because the topic might be traumatic for some readers. My last update ended with my ex coming to work to offer me pixel money for my cat. This was in August 2022. I vacated his flat at the end of July. I thought everything was said and done and I would not hear from him again. Spoiler, I was wrong. Since the breakup, he has messaged me about every 3 months on Discord for various bullshit, like how he lost his best friend or asking for photos of the cat. I didn't block him there in case either of us needed to exchange items we forgot at our respective places. Sometime in March I found out by chance that he's still using my old League account. He has been banned on 3 different accounts for toxicity. I gave him the password while we were dating, but I did not think he would have the audacity to continue using it after we broke up. The kicker is, all it would take would be to ask me to use it and I would have no problems with it. It really rubbed me the wrong way that he could message me with his woe is me crap on 4 different occasions but conveniently forgot to mention that he is still playing on my account. I wondered for about a week whether to let it slide or to just change the password. Then he contacted me again about wanting to ask me something. I shot this down and reminded him that I explicitly told him not to contact me. He said okay. This lasted for a fortnight until he messaged me again, saying that he will ask his question regardless. I pointed out how I told him not to contact me and he could not respect even that. So he has learned nothing, as he still does not give a fuck about other people's boundaries. The question was, what did it feel like to be with a complete monster for 7 years? Why did you stay for so long? Apparently the lad was going through some kind of epiphany phase. There were a lot of crocodile tear-laced explanations that followed. The gist of it was that he was doing some reflections. He realized he is a complete lunatic and needs help and apologized for how he behaved. I also found out that he spent all his savings and disability money, including the crypto he offered me for the cat. So he could not take me up on the offer to buy my LOL account. Sag. Also, to nobody's surprise, his little affair did not work out. I did not ask for details, but what he said was, I think I finally met a person who is more sick and broken inside than me, which is quite an achievement. Few months prior to this revelation, a WoW friend from the side chick's country messaged me. For context, we are all Europeans and play on the same servers. Friend knew my side of the story, and when he found out that side chick is flying to my and ex's country, he put 2 and 2 together. He told me he does not expect much from their relationship since a year ago the chick was dating a mate of his, broke his heart and flew somewhere else for the next WoW guy that gave her attention. Knowing these facts, and after what my ex said, I mentioned to him how it was ironic that he cried cheating if I was 5 minutes late after work, but decided to involve himself with a woman who was practicing cheating as a sport. He agreed that it was quite ironic indeed and that he had to lay in the bed that he made, which was sort of mature on his part, I suppose. Also, did I mention he was too dumb to wire his own debit card to his WoW account? This is why he could not play anymore. Well, yeah, but I guess also because he lost his sugar mommy that was paying for it and failed to secure another. As for me, Kitty and I are thriving. I am active. I lost 12 kilograms since the breakup and I'm getting back in shape, even though I lost the excess weight the moment I dumped the ex. I have reconnected with most of my friends and apologized for not contacting them very much in the past 7 years and explained why. They were very understanding and things have gone very much to how they were before. I have also met the most decent, kind and compassionate man out there. So, life is looking good. Thank you for all the support, Reddit. Thank you for reading and have a great day. Am I the asshole for criticizing the name my cousin picked out for her baby and ruining her excitement? My cousin Stephanie and I are really more friends than relatives. An important note is that she's not really online much, so can be out of the loop on certain memes and jokes in internet culture, and TBH, doesn't really understand the concept of viral internet references or how they work. Stephanie is pregnant and just found out it's going to be a girl. About a week ago she told a gathering of her best girlfriends that she's going to name her daughter Karen. The room instantly went cold, But after an awkward silence, everyone else politely said it was lovely. I couldn't bring myself to respond at all. Later in the evening, when Stephanie was out of the room, everyone was immediately like, OMG, that poor kid, and why would she pick Karen of all names? I was uncomfortable with this conversation, given that everyone had been so positive about the name to her face. I thought more about it over the next couple of days, and just felt really weird about the whole thing. The name is really loaded, to the point it could be detrimental to the baby, and Stephanie had no idea of the connotations to make an informed decision. So a couple of days later, I tentatively brought it up. I told her I was so excited for the baby, and just wanted her to have all available information when picking a name. I then started to explain that Karen has some negative connotations and has become sort of an internet joke to describe a specific kind of entitled middle-aged woman. Stephanie instantly was furious and started talking over me, saying, "Why are you saying this? This is so mean?" I was really surprised by her reaction. It felt very, very out of character. So I immediately stopped and said, "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I just wanted to tell you something I thought you might not know." She replied, "That's the name I picked for my daughter. And you think I picked it as some kind of joke? I don't understand why you'd say something so hurtful." When she said that, I felt like it signaled that she didn't really understand what I was trying to tell her, so after agonizing for a second about whether to press the issue even though she was so angry, I felt like in for a penny. In for a pound. And since she was already mad, I wanted her to at least understand what I was trying to explain to her. I googled Karen Know Your Meme on my phone and tried to show her the screen of results while saying, "Look, I'm just saying that there's more meaning to the name than you may realize." She stood up, pushed my phone away and shouted, "Wow!" She then stormed out of my home and drove away. My aunt and mom have been berating me all week, because Stephanie told them that I made fun of her baby name. Stephanie has not spoken to me or responded to my text since. I can take a hint and I'm not going to broach a topic again that caused so much distress, but I keep going back and forth on whether I was TA here by bringing it up in the first place. Note, in the original post, OOP was overwhelmingly given a YTA judgment in response to this post. Edit. Thanks everyone. I have been properly schooled, and I accept my judgment that I was TA here. Stephanie and I have a history of being extremely open and honest with each other. I was the maid of honor in her wedding, which we planned on being the case from a young age, and we always joked as teenagers that part of my duties would include talking her out of the marriage if the groom she picked sucked. And so maybe I was too flippant with approaching this topic due to our history, and was unempathetic in underestimating how much she was already invested in the name she chose for her future daughter. I admit I'm a bit frustrated that Stephanie still doesn't understand what I was trying to tell her. She still thinks I was making some kind of weird, cruel joke accusing her of picking the name as a joke. But I have messaged her a sincere apology that she accepted, and I will never speak of this again, to Stephanie or baby Karen. I'll also stand up for Stephanie if her other friends shit talk the name around me again. If they're not willing to voice their thoughts to Stephanie directly, they need to not say the kinds of things they were saying behind her back. Edit 2. One more thing. I definitely was not trying to tell Stephanie to not name her daughter Karen. I just wanted her to make the decision either way knowing the connotations, since I'd want someone to do the same for me if I picked a baby name with cultural baggage I wasn't aware of. I realize now I handled it poorly and was hurtful to Stephanie in the process, but I just wanted to be clear that I wasn't actively trying to talk her out of the name. I just didn't want her to be blindsided if it came up later. Additional context from OP's comments. Stephanie and her husband have a deal on baby names where she picks girl baby names, he picks boy baby names, and they each have unlimited veto power for the other person's choices. He's on board with Karen Efek. We're all the same age, late 20s, but neither of them spends time online or is even particularly tech-savvy. Update 1. My post last summer wasn't the most exciting or dramatic on AITA, but I wanted to provide an update if anyone is interested. Baby Karen was born healthy and happy back in October. She's an absolute sweetheart of a baby, and I'm totally in love with her. Between March and May I didn't get to see her at all in person, but I was doing regular FaceTime, house party calls with Stephanie and Karen, and over the last few weeks, I've been going over to Stephanie's house to sit in her backyard and chat with Stephanie coo at Karen from a lengthy distance. I have 2 reasons for updating. First, I've realized since Karen's birth that her name has taken on new meaning to me. When I'm with her, Karen just means her, and I don't think about the other connotations. In other words, you guys were right. That said though, my second reason for updating is that Stephanie got back into her years unused Facebook at the beginning of the pandemic to keep in touch with people. She's been on it pretty regularly lately for the first time in years. Historically, she's not really been into social media. Most people in our area, social circle have been posting really heavily about BLM and the protests happening right now, as well as racial justice issues more generally. As a result, Stephanie has now come into contact with a deluge of Karen memes for the first time, and found them confusing and horrifying, especially the use of Karen as shorthand for a racist. I've basically just declined to talk about it with Stephanie, because it went so poorly last time, but both my mother and her mother have hounded me about it because it's upsetting to Stephanie, and said things like, "Is this what you were talking about before? Why didn't you say so? Why didn't you explain it better? You should have told Stephanie." And Jesus wept. You really can't win. Thanks again for all your feedback on my last post. It was very helpful in giving me some zen about the situation. Edit. Wow, I've been super overwhelmed by the flood of very kind, heartfelt PMs, and just one or two not so kind ones, as well as the comments on my other post. Thank you everyone. It continually amazes me how many nice and empathetic people frequent a sub devoted to assholes. Additional comments from OP for context. In response to someone criticizing Stephanie, to be fair, Stephanie has been cool about it. First, she saw a bunch of posts about the Central Park Karen, when that white lady was harassing the black birdwatcher in the park, and came to me asking me to explain why everyone was calling the woman Karen when her name was Amy. Since she's gotten back on Facebook, she often asks me to be like her internet culture interpreter. I immediately told her, "Sorry, I'm not having a conversation with you about this, because we had a major conflict over it last year, and I'm not getting into it with you." I think that was the first time she started to understand what I'd been telling her last year. And in fairness to her, she didn't bring it up with me again after that. As for my mom and aunt, they're kind of generally ridiculous. They tend to be extremely reactive to whatever is going on precisely at the moment, and if someone in the family is upset, they get over-involved trying to fix it. Stephanie has been venting to her mom about this, not about me, just how upsetting the memes are. And she and my mom have just been doing their normal thing of blowing it out of proportion, and now making it my fault somehow. I love my mom and aunt dearly, but they're not to be reasoned with. In response to another criticism of Stephanie, honestly, with my mom and aunt, it's easier to just wait for them to move on to the next shiny thing. I don't blame Stephanie at all. She's just upset and confused, but hasn't made it my problem at all. My aunt and mom just have a flair for the dramatic. In response to someone saying they still thought OP was TA because they only brought up concerns with the name for selfish reasons. I probably wasn't clear about this in my original post, and I think it's probably because that's the part I cut down when I went way over the word limit on that first post, but when I described feeling weird and uncomfortable over the couple of days I took to ruminate after Stephanie's announcement, the weirdness and discomfort was mostly a response to what happened with our friend group rather than just my own feelings about the name. I felt super uncomfortable being in the room while our friends shit-talked Stephanie's name choice after praising it to her face. I didn't have the presence of mind to call them out before the moment passed, and I sat with that guilt for a couple of days. I didn't want to tell Stephanie what they said, because it would be tattly of me, and I also didn't want to cause conflict within the friend group or upset Stephanie. So raising the topic on my own seemed like a good compromise at the time. I did wrestle internally with how to handle it, and clearly I missed the mark. In response to the comment, do you understand that there is a massive difference in being upset with your friends for their response, and approaching Stephanie because you say you want her to be fully informed of her name choice? These are two different things that you're conflating. No, to be clear, I didn't raise the conversation with Stephanie in lieu of scolding our friends. I brought it up because I thought they owed it to her to raise those points to her face if they were going to say them at all. Ultimately, I thought Stephanie was owed the knowledge of those connotations, whatever she chose to do with that knowledge. Also, I don't know how to explain the context of our relationship, but Stephanie and I have a lifetime of shared radical honesty with one another, from the inconsequential, telling each other when outfits are unflattering, to the difficult, when she gave me a come to Jesus talk years ago about how someone I considered a close friend was super shitty to me and that I should end the friendship. Based on our extreme closeness and shared history, this conversation felt like the right move at the time, even though it ultimately backfired. Update 2. Hi all. I've gotten a few PMs over the last couple years asking for updates, and since we just celebrated Karen's 3rd birthday, I wanted to circle back to anyone following this story. First of all, baby Karen, not so much a baby anymore, is doing amazingly on her developmental milestones. She's a very bright child, sharp as the sharpest tack, and extremely tuned into her environment. Some of what she says is already fully in complete sentences, which just makes me want to cry when I hear it, because it seems like Stephanie was giving birth just yesterday. Karen loves books already, and will intently study the pictures in them for huge stretches of time and claim to be reading. And you would not believe the uncomfortably incisive questions she's already asking. I am fully convinced this child is going to grow up to be an actual genius. Regarding the name, unfortunately, when Karen started daycare earlier this year, she started getting grief for her name pretty quickly from the older kids. The daycare she attends mixes the ages together at a couple of different points throughout the day, and while there fortunately wasn't much direct bullying, 2 of the age 5s must have heard and internalized the derogatory connotations of the name Karen at home. As a result, they found her name absolutely hysterical, and they kind of spread the idea to the other kids that there was something funny wrong about her name. Karen was too little to understand what was happening, but found the other kids' behavior toward her generally upsetting. The daycare staff made every effort to shut it down, and let Stephanie and her husband know right away. After about a month of this, where the daycare wasn't having much success putting the kibosh on this behavior, and the kids weren't dropping it, Stephanie and her husband made the decision that Karen would be going by Carrie from now on, which was already an established nickname that a lot of family and friends were already using, and that Karen already recognized as referring to herself. Stephanie and I never really fully revisited what happened during her pregnancy, but when she was telling me about what was happening in daycare, she apologized to me. I immediately felt terrible and reassured her there was no reason to apologize. Emotions are complicated when you're pregnant, and that I thought having Karen go by Carrie was a great solution. Though changing what you're used to calling someone is fucking hard, I've found. And I'm still directly addressing her on manual mode, every single time. A lot of the responses I got to my last post were gleeful and leaned into the schadenfreude of the situation. And I have to say those responses really bummed me out. I would much rather live in a world where I was wrong about the impact Karen's name would have on her. I cannot emphasize enough what a sweet-dispositioned, smart, curious, loving little girl Carrie is, and how much she deserves every good thing in life. Also, a lot of people didn't like Stephanie in my last post, but I need you to understand that this is a tiny snapshot of a very emotionally high-strung time in her life, and overall, Stephanie is a wonderful lifelong friend. She has gotten me through so many personal crises over the years, and she will never fail to show up for the people she cares about. Being pregnant and having a strong emotional attachment to the name you've picked out for your daughter is completely understandable, and her pregnancy was pretty rough on her moods. She once wept uncontrollably at a cat food commercial when she was about 7 months pregnant. I also think my approach for trying to explain the name issue those years ago was very clumsy, and I could have done a better job of bringing it up. That said, with the distance of time, I am really glad I broached the topic. I feel like I owed Stephanie that information, and I can feel good about giving it to her. If I'd chosen not to bring it up at the time, I think I'd have a lot of regrets now. The only thing I'd change now, looking back, is that I would try to bring it up more gently somehow with Stephanie so I could have had the chance to explain. In summary, all is well. We've run into a little bump in the road with other kids' reactions to Carrie's name, but in some ways, it's better to get this out of the way now, when Carrie doesn't really understand what's happening, than have this happen in kindergarten or elementary school down the road, when full-on bullying could be a risk. She's adjusting really well to going by her nickname full-time, and Stephanie and her husband are planning on enrolling her with Carrie as her preferred name in all future schooling. And since schools around here go by preferred name rather than legal name in things like classroom roll calls, it's possible she can get through K-12 without it ever really being widely known among her peers that her legal name is Karen. And I really hope this common usage of the name Karen dies down in the next few years. Edit. Really disappointed to be getting hate messages directed at Carrie, wishing that terrible things befall her and calling her the C-word. Please remember she's an innocent child. Edit 2. Point of clarification. The boys at daycare apparently didn't know that Karen was a name. The way they'd heard it used at home made them think it was just a term used to insult people, and that it might be a bad word. That's why they found it so funny, because in their worldview, it was like meeting someone named Fartface, or Asshole. The daycare staff explained to them that Karen is a real name, and that lots of people are named Karen, and of course they tried their best to curtail the mockery, but nothing really helped until the name change and a little bit of time had passed. Things at the daycare are now back to normal, the other kids are calling her Carrie, and everyone has, fortunately, moved on. Edit 3. Please don't harass Redditors who gave a YTA judgment on my first post. They gave their honest judgment at the time in an online space specifically set up for the purpose. I didn't post on an advice sub, I posted on a judgment sub, and there's no reason to call people to the mat for judgments I asked for, made in good faith, from 3 years ago. A comment defending Stephanie in response to someone commenting that she's a bad friend to OP. Stephanie is genuinely a great friend and a good person. She once dropped everything and drove 300 miles because I had just been in a, relatively minor, car accident in a city I lived all alone in as a young adult. She once gifted me $1,500, no questions asked, and insisted I never even think about paying it back, When I needed to get out of a really bad cohabiting situation while broke. When we were teenagers and the cool boy she had a massive crush on made fun of me for something I was extremely sensitive about. Instead of keeping quiet, she blew her top, stuck up for me and told him off, then led me away to comfort me away from him. She is loyal and kind and has incredible character. This post is such a tiny snapshot of who she is as a person. When I raised my concerns, Stephanie was emotional, very pregnant, and somewhat sleep deprived. Her pregnancy was rough on her body, and on top of hormones, I think she was just genuinely confused by what I was trying to tell her. Final update. For those of you who have contacted me asking for an update, I wanted to circle back and close the book on the baby Carrie chapter. As of last month, Carrie is now legally Caroline, last name, and she has even been issued a new birth certificate with her new legal name. The daycare bullying issues had already died down since Stephanie and her husband switched to calling her Carrie, but this legal name change now means that the Karen issue won't crop up again when she starts school. There were also some other minor incidents that pushed Stephanie and her husband to make that decision around a legal name change. They were getting to the point where, almost any time they were having to provide Karen's legal name to get a service, they were getting an immediate reaction, even from adults. It was usually just a meaningful look, but barbed comments were not unusual. The final straw was when they were at the airport getting ready to fly to visit Stephanie's in-laws with Carrie. The TSA agent at security made a snarky comment, and then later when they needed to ask the gate agent about their seats, the gate agent rudely laughed at seeing Carrie's ticket, then showed the gate agent standing next to her, who just shook her head and said, "Poor kid," to her co-worker while fully ignoring Stephanie and her husband. And they had this interaction in front of Carrie. Something about that day in the airport was a turning point for Stephanie and her husband, and they started the name change process as soon as they got home. It was much easier than they were expecting, and cost a grand total of $30. Carrie is a joyful, sociable little girl, and while it's impossible to know right now if these negative experiences caused any lasting damage, and I sincerely hope they did not, I'm happy to see that she continues to be a very outgoing, confident child. The conversation with Stephanie I mentioned in my October update was awkward and brief, but we've actually gotten back into it a few times since. Stephanie has apologized profusely for her initial reaction when we first talked. I've apologized for approaching things so poorly, and not telling her right away about what our friends were saying behind her back, and in those conversations, we mainly ended up focusing on the resulting spiraling of my mom and aunt and what a mess that turned into. Together we've started to unpack some of the intergenerational shit around our family issues. To provide some of that context, our maternal grandparents were a nightmare. Our grandfather was an authoritarian revivalist preacher who was physically abusive and referred to himself as the spiritual leader and ultimate authority of the family. Our grandmother was a manipulative narcissist, who psychologically tormented my mom and aunt for their entire childhoods. As a result, my mom and aunt's trauma bonded considerably during their childhood and grew into extremely anxious and reactive adults. Any whiff of conflict sends them into panic mode, and in our family, we have these well-worn grooves of behavioral habits with my mom and aunt overreacting to anything that feels like discord, and scrambling to clumsily smooth things over. As a result, Stephanie and I have both been working hard to build better boundaries with our mom's generation, and have agreed to be really cautious about what information we give them, especially anything that is highly emotional. I've been in therapy for a couple of years now, and Stephanie also started therapy late last year. We've been talking about the ways that my grandparents traumatizing our moms caused intergenerational issues that impacted us, and Stephanie is determined that the cycle ends with her, and that these issues will not go on to touch Carrie. Thank you everyone for your kind words, both here on my profile posts and on the Best of Updates reposts, which I've also been reading. I've gotten some incredibly thoughtful and kind messages, which have meant a lot to me, even if I haven't had the chance to respond to all of them. For those who may still want to be critical of Stephanie, I again want to emphasize how out of character her initial reaction was, and how much physical, hormonal, and emotional upheaval she was in at the time. These posts are a teeny tiny window into just one aspect of the dynamic, funny, kind, caring full human being that is my cousin and best friend. Stephanie has been my most loyal and trusted friend for pretty much my entire life, and she has fully earned some grace for reacting less than perfectly to my extremely clumsy approach when she was sleep deprived, hormonally wrecked and brain fogged. Stephanie has read these posts now as well, along with most of your comments, and, after I explained to her what Reddit is, they were helpful to both of us in our talks about our weird family dynamic. I can't imagine I'll have any more updates down the line, but thanks for following along the last few years. My autistic brother spent over £400 of my hard-earned money on Lego, and my mum supports this. I, 14, have a brother 16 who has autism and I just can't stand it anymore. Before you go and make assumptions, let me get this out of the way. He's not like the autistic people you see on the news or online. He's a perfectly functional, intelligent person. However, he becomes violent when he doesn't get his way, and his brain doesn't get toilet messages, regularly pisses, shits himself. The thing with him is, these things only happen at home. Anywhere else, he doesn't have any problems with accidents in his pants. What happened today drove me over the edge to the point of writing this. For context, here is the usual routine. I woke up to him on my bed hitting me repeatedly. My parents are downstairs making breakfast, oblivious to this. He won't stop, so I shout for my mom. She comes upstairs, gets him off me by rewarding him with chocolate, and proceeds to yell at me for shouting at her, and confiscate my electronics for an hour. When I get home from school, all is fine. I do some homework and go on the Xbox. After around 30 minutes on the Xbox, he does the same thing. Hits me over and over, leaving me with no choice but to call for my mom. She again rewards him for stopping, before proceeding to tell me off, and confiscate my electronics for the rest of the day. I'm writing this with the phone one of my friends bought for me, which I keep under my bed, as this is the only way I get to use technology for over 40 minutes a day. A reminder that this is the daily routine and has been occurring for at least 5 years. However, what happened today was even worse. He'd seen a Lego set that he wanted and beat me up until he got it. I shouted for my mom, but this time, she did something different. She let him order all the Lego he wanted, from my debit card. I've been saving up doing my paper round for 2 years to buy a PC, and he just blew 400 pounds of my money on Lego. I hate this. I hate my life. It feels like I'm only living to suffer. This post is purely me venting, and will likely not go anywhere, but I don't care. With all that said, is there anything I can do about this? I'm a minor in the UK if that helps. TLDR, my autistic brother spent over 400 pounds of my hard-earned money on Lego, and my mum supports this edit. Thanks for all the supportive comments. I didn't think anyone would care. Edit 2, 2,000 upvotes. You guys are insane. I didn't think anyone would care about this, but obviously you guys do. I'm writing an update to answer some of your questions, and explain my next moves. Again, thank you all so much for all of the support update. First, I just want to say thank you. Thank you all so much for all the support on the original post and all of your ideas in the comments. I tried to reply to every comment, but there are so many that I can't do that, although I do read them all. Second, I want to do a quick FAQ as many comments are asking the same thing. So here goes. Move in with another family member, tell another family member. They all live 100 plus miles away and don't believe that it's serious. You can get your money back as you're the cardholder. Nope, I need a legal guardian to go into the bank with me to do that. And finally, hit him back. I am a weak, 5 foot tall 14-year-old. He is a strong, 6 foot tall 16-year-old. This would cause more harm to me because he would attack back harder, and my mum would punish me more. Next, to the people who have offered me money in PMs and the comments. Thank you all so much for the offer, but I'm not going to accept anything. As I've come to realize, the assault is far more serious than the money at the end of the day. Finally, on to my plan. After reading literally 100s of comments, I've decided that the best course of action is to leg it out of school to the police station on Wednesday, and show them my collected video evidence, and the bruises on my arms. Again, thank you all so much for your advice. Please let me know if this is what I should do or if there's a better alternative. Edit. Just got 3 videos of this story in a row on TikTok. That's absolutely crazy. I punched an autistic kid after he groped me and now everyone hates me. Am I the jerk? That grope was the last straw. I have known Troy since nursery, kindergarten for Americans, or just anyone, and he has always been a baby. It was always his autism that made him who he was. I don't know why, but he always had a crush on me. I rejected him gently multiple times, but he never took no for an answer. As we grew older, he got worse. He started commenting on my chest. Asking to touch them. Asking to see them. His friends kept trying to convince me to show him because nobody would be nice enough to give him a chance. And in year 7, 6th grade, he started groping me. I told teachers, but they kept saying that his autism doesn't make him know any better. It was only me. He got jealous when I was in the presence of another guy. He would have meltdowns and I got into trouble because I knew how upset he would get. No, I didn't. It was like my only purpose was to be his. I wasn't allowed to be my own person. The groping continued. I kept telling him to stop. He didn't listen. I remember crying on the floor and teachers just kept saying that his autism makes him like this and that I'm being a good person by taking care of him. His groping hurt. I don't know how to explain it. He just grabbed my chest and butt hard. And it hurts. The groping continued for 4 years. I was always his caretaker, his girlfriend, his best friend, his. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. It was hot and I wore a skirt and he proceeded to put his hands up my skirt and groped my butt. I lost it and punched him around the nose. His nose got broken and unfortunately now I am getting put into isolation for 2 months for bullying an autistic kid. He's not a kid though. He's 16 years old. He acts normal around his friends. He treats everyone else with respect. He's not a kid. Now everyone hates me. I have been receiving death threats and people have been saying he should have done worse. Now all I want to do is curl up and die. Maybe I should have been nicer. Maybe I should have been more sympathetic. Maybe I should have just accepted it. I could have been his only chance. For the record, I don't despise autistic people. He is not a representative of them. He is just an awful person. Troy is just a horrible person. Thank you for letting me vent. Edit. Hi all. I didn't expect so much attention, so thank you for the validation. Giving my context. His parents are prominent people in our community. His dad is a third-generation Army something, IDK, and his mom is known for always holding all of the stuff for kids. Like the summer fairs, etc. She is also part of the school board and friends with the higher-ups if you will, which is why this happened at all. I wasn't technically his caretaker because I didn't have to feed him, clothe him, etc. I just had to be his friend. His dad is also friends with the police station, they go way back, so that's another reason why they didn't do much. Or just took a statement then wrote him off as mentally disabled. And the police here just suck ass here. Police officers have essayed many women before here. They just get let off unfortunately. Onto a semi-update. Firstly, my parents will look into lawyers, we just couldn't afford one, and I was always too scared to get one. I guess it was because I have been so neglected, that I just thought nobody would believe me. However, my other relatives said that they would chip in and pay for a good lawyer. Meanwhile, my parents took me out of the school and I will stay at my grandma's for a while to recover. My auntie is also going to pay for my therapy. So I will enjoy that much needed therapy. Thank you so much for the kind words. I hope you all miraculously wake up with more money in your bank's accounts than you expected. Edit 2. Hi all, I didn't expect this story to end up on TikTok so quickly. I would like to thank you all again for your words and thank you so much to those who have been reaching out to me. It means a lot. I would also like to point out that this is a throwaway account, and I want to stay anonymous. But thank you all so much again for the kind words and comments. I realize that I was never in the wrong. That I am a person. Thank you. I truly hope you all have the best days ever. You all are amazing. Relevant comments from OOP. Comment 1. Is the kid cognitively challenged? OP, nope, he has mild autism if that makes sense. He's actually quite good around people. Just not me. IG. Comment 2. I would get law enforcement involved. OP, we tried to. They just didn't care because he is mentally challenged. My parents genuinely tried to do something, but when everyone defends him, they believe the majority. I mean, when I usually say this story, people automatically think I hate autistic people. I don't. Because autistic people don't do this. Horrible people do. Autism isn't the label for assault, the label is sexual assaulter. Update. Firstly, I would like to thank you all so much for your kind words and messages. Thank you for your support and validation. Your words meant so much to me. Also, I thought I would explain the whole "I hope you all miraculously wake up with more money in your bank account" comment. I heard someone in TikTok say this and thought it would be a nice thing to say, as some people did question it in my messages. But yeah, thank you all again. Before this update starts, I would like to say that this all occurred like 2 weeks ago now. I just reached my breaking point and needed to vent. Hence why the update may be soon to some. This won't be the final update, but an update. I would also like to clear the air with my parents. Now unfortunately, my parents come from a country where this stuff is normal. Not only that, but I am partially to blame as I didn't say anything. Eventually I did tell them and they tried their best to help me. But they didn't know how. Though I do acknowledge their efforts, I am still going to be taking time to heal from them as well. My entire family also had a go at them and expressed their disappointment. The best thing for now is for me to spend some time apart from them. So to begin, I left the school. After my parents had heard that I got into trouble seriously because of Troy again, they basically thought it was time to pull me out. I am due to start my new school in 2 weeks. I have also been trying to settle at my grandma's house as I just needed a fresh start with fresh people. To be honest, I have never felt so free. I have had to deal with that torment for years and years. So now I can enjoy the pleasure of walking home and not seeing him or bumping into him. So I feel great. On to the serious stuff. As I had mentioned, my family basically decided to pay for a lawyer, and we are now hoping to have a lawsuit against basically everyone involved. My grandma also had a go to put nicely with the school's board for basically allowing nepotism to harass other girls. She called all of the teachers a disgrace for endangering not only me but other people and saying how none of the teachers who allowed this deserved to even step foot into a school. This experience has also not been all sunshines and daisies. After the suit was claimed or made, IDK, my parents got letters and messages basically asking for the case to be dropped. My parents obviously said no. But it still didn't stop the harassment. I eventually got harassed too. All of the people giving me death threats decided to go into graphic detail on what Troy wanted to do to me. Spoiler, it wasn't great. And Troy's parents showed up on my doorstep demanding to see me and talk to me, and how Troy is ready to apologize. Thankfully by then my uncle and I had been on the way to my grandma's house. However, my parents obviously didn't let them in regardless and said that if they wanted to communicate it had to be through a lawyer. The harassment didn't stop. And eventually Troy sent me a message on a burner account detailing all of the things he was going to do if got the opportunity to, and that I should be grateful that I managed to walk away with just a groping. Troy also kept spewing on about how I'm nothing but a whore or slut, etc. And I should be grateful that someone so popular even looked my way. He kept saying how if I had just let him fuck me, he wouldn't have groped me. However, I know if I did that I would no longer be myself. I would be his property forever. The thought of that makes me want to vomit. Also, his logic doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, I just got receipts and blocked him. I also asked my parents to help me change my number. And I did. My grandma, being the person she is, decided that wasn't good enough and got me a whole new phone. She claims it's compensation for my trauma. Thanks, Grandma. I am starting therapy the day after tomorrow, and I am hoping to start family therapy in August as, truthfully, I don't know if I'm mad at my parents or should be mad. Like, is it my fault for not saying anything? But that's all the update I can give you for now. The lawsuit will be a whole other process, and hopefully if I remember I can update you all again. Thank you so much for your words. I truly appreciate all of you. I hope this update is clear enough for you, and apologies if you made it this far. After being engaged for 7 months, I struggle with my fiancé's abusive family. Am I wrong for wanting to leave? I've been dating my fiancé for 4 years and have been engaged for 7 months. We are trying to plan out a wedding for roughly fall next year. Her childhood was terrible and abusive, to put it mildly. Her parents were raging narcissists, and she was the scapegoat for her 2 brothers. She was abused and thrown out the moment she turned 18. She was, however, a great student and hard worker, so with some scholarships and a part-time job, she has a great career and is pretty independent. The problem is that she still had contact with her family. None of them have changed. Well, actually something has changed. They have become more financially dependent on her. They enjoy slowly creeping back into her life and emotionally blackmailing her for support or whatever she can do. They're not pleasant about it either. They're rude, smug, and generally enjoy being a nuisance. And my fiancé can't say no. No matter the horrible things they say or how they outright try to intimidate her openly. I've always known her family history and have always supported her through the issues with them, but in the last year or so they've become far more brazen and asinine. They come over to our house more often. They make messes all around the place. Her mother acts like she's the fucking stepmother from Cinderella. Her dad drinks all my fucking beer and empties out half the fridge. Her brothers stop by occasionally to act as mouthpieces for their parents. They practically trash the place and leave us to clean the mess. And where is my fiancé in all this? Quietly standing in the corner, practically shaking. I'm no fool here. There's legitimate trauma. There's her need to feel loved by them and her hoping they will appreciate her. Before one of you noble commenters states the obvious, she's been in therapy for this for years. I've tried to establish boundaries. For nearly 2 years I've been trying to push these ass clowns away. But this is her house she purchased, and no matter of contributions, financial of otherwise, will she let me have a say on who comes into her house. She's been beaten down mentally and emotionally by them for so long. She has told me recently that she wants to earn their approval. How they were right about her. How she needs to be better for them. I've had too many emotional conversations with tears and begging to count, hoping she will take the steps to get better. But she's an adult. I can't force her to do anything. I love her, but I can't help but feel so resentful of what she's doing. It's agonizing watching someone you love, someone who you know deserves so much better, openly destroy themselves for people like her family. It's been painful watching her cry herself to sleep one too many nights because of them. I've tried too many times to help her get out of their clutches. But I have to think of the future. What happens when we have kids? What happens when she is postpartum and invites them over? What happens if there is a medical emergency for either of us? What if our finances get tight and they still demand money? This is the in-law family from hell and I won't be able to avoid them. Tomorrow I'm going to tell her how I want to delay the wedding until firm boundaries are established. If she resents me, I walk. I can't do it anymore. I refuse to watch a slow death like this any further. Update. Talked to her and it went about as well as one could possibly expect. Currently getting myself set up in a hotel for a few days and working on possible long-term plans for moving out. Still a lot going on right now, but maybe sometime next week I'll be able to put everything together into one update. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Would the two of you be open to couples therapy? Therapy is too often brought up as the ultimate solution to relationship problems, but in this instance having a neutral third party who is experienced and qualified in the area of couples therapy could be really helpful. Best of luck, and the only AHs here are her family OP. I've hinted at it before but she hasn't been very receptive. I'm hoping tomorrow I can try and pursue that and not have to make an ultimatum. Comment 2. You can't save her if she doesn't want to be saved. Even if she wants to, you'd only be able to help and support. She needs to be the one to enforce the boundaries and hold them. But she doesn't? It's up to you if you want this for life. Have you spoken to her about where you are? That you're on the verge of breaking up with her for this lack of boundaries? No, it's not to manipulate her into choosing you, although some will say that. It's just a statement of fact. She may be willing to sacrifice everything for her family, but you are not. If this is the life you have to look forward to, you don't want it. You need to put yourself and your needs first. Who knows? It may prompt her to open her eyes and put herself first with her family. But likely not. Update 1. The night after I made the first post I had decided that I was going to have a heart-to-heart with my fiancée about her family. However, she came back from work the next day early and I already was off that day, so I initiated the talk a little sooner than I planned. Essentially, I told her how this arrangement was not sustainable. I did not feel comfortable marrying her due to how much involvement in her life her family has, and I certainly did not feel comfortable bringing a child into this world with them. I didn't want to tell her cold turkey no contact with them, but strict limitations to start with on then coming over, and what they can do around the house. I also requested couples therapy before marriage. She wasn't happy. She was just staring angrily at me while I spoke, then started yelling at me when I finished. She told me I don't understand their dynamic and it worked for her. I told her that they're abusive users who will bleed her dry and I have never seen them show any decency to her. She told me she just had to work harder for them to appreciate her. I basically yelled at her that a parent's child shouldn't have to beg and plead and work for them to be loved. I finally told her that she sets limits with them or I walk. She was livid, and since I was living in her house I was kicked out. So the past few days I have been staying in a hotel and have had my stuff taken out and put into storage. And frankly, it's been great. I am going to stay with family for a few weeks around mid-July, and after that I am going to go house searching for myself. I have spent the last couple days relaxing, catching up on movies and video games I haven't had time for, and could go back from work to a quiet room without her family tearing the place apart. Yesterday, however, things came to a head. We have basically been no contact since she booted me out, but I know every Saturday her family loves to spend the afternoon over and she uses me as a shield from their abuse. However, in a very petty move I simply kept my phone muted all day and played Disco Elysian. I knew she would call back for help with her family, and at this point pure resentment was kicking in for her and I wanted nothing to do with her issues. By the end of the night she had sent me over a dozen texts and finally 2 frantic voicemails begging me to come home. I decided to come over to check up on her. Long story short, she was sobbing in the living room, and when I came to talk to her she was practically crushing my back, hugging me and sobbing. I gave her time to cool off and asked what happened. Long story short, her parents and brother came by to gift money from her and say horrible shit to her. She wanted to have me come over to help, but I was ignoring her. And when she tried to have one of her friends help out and everyone basically said fuck that, it all started clicking in for her. She kicked her family out, but not before they said some utterly vile shit to her I won't repeat. She kept apologizing to me and told me over and over to come home. I told her plainly that I had started to build up heavy resentment towards her for some time, and while I loved her and understand it was trauma and not her being outright abusive, there was major issues that would need to be addressed if we were to move forward. She sells the house and moves. We make roughly the same amount of money and we will buy a house together. I am a grown-ass man and I will not live in a house I have no equal agency over. Her family will never step a foot in it. They will never come over? They will be treated by me in a very threatening manner if they try and come in. She gets a new therapist and we start premarital counseling. She never makes me interact with her family. We will go LC with her family right now, but make no mistake, we are working towards full NC on her end. I told her I love her. We have been together for a while now and have beautiful memories together, and I know she is suffering from abuse, but these are non-negotiable, and if she has a problem with any of them then we have to go out separate ways. She told me she's realized for a while now that her family is toxic and unhealthy. She wants to make changes. She has accepted, but some of these will take a while to see through. For now I am going to stay in the hotel until I head back to stay with my family. She is welcome to come over, but I have made it clear her house is not somewhere I want to go. Her and I are both off tomorrow, so we will spend the day here and maybe go out. This is obviously not over yet, but I might not post anything else until mid-August or so. Relevant comments. Comment 1. It's cute you think she won't continue to choose her family over you, but it's going to be even worse once you're legally bound by a home purchase. Comment 2. She isn't going to follow through. She is going to do anything she can to keep you around as her shield, but she isn't going to cut them off. And if you get a house together and God forbid have a child, you're then tied to them and your child is tied to them for the rest of your life. The best thing you can do is step away. Update 2. Despite all intentions of not updating until much later with the hopes of an improved relationship with my fiancée and her establishing boundaries with her toxic family, we are now broken up. Essentially what happened was, after last weekend where I left her for the time to deal with them herself, she seemed to finally grasp the situation and was open to changes, including boundaries and a possible move. We spent Monday and Tuesday hanging out in my hotel that I was staying in until I went back to my family for a couple weeks. The other night she was being very vague with texting when she originally was supposed to come over. She came much later than expected and I knew something was up. She basically unloaded on me how I was abusive, controlling, overly demanding and unsupportive. It took me 5 fucking seconds to figure out she was repeating verbatim some sort of rehearsed speech from her parents. And to be honest, I was so agitated at this point, despite making a huge gamble on her, I decided to be a prick about it. I asked her if her family told her to say this. She said they suggested it to her, but she came up with it herself. Sorry. I asked her to explain in detail what I did. She said I was living like a parasite off her. I reminded her that I'm paying 50/50ths for her fucking mortgage, 50/50ths for utilities and groceries as well. I have my own car I pay for. A job that makes just about as much as hers, unlike her fucking leech parents who demand payments on the weekly and raid the kitchen on the weekends. I told her to try again with something better. She looked flustered and said I was trying to isolate her. I kinda smirked like a jackass and told her that I have always supported her many friendships that she has destroyed on her own because no one wants to deal with her family or be used as a shield like me. I was practically demanding to know at this point why she is so hell-bent on destroying her life for these people. She just kinda shouted that I don't understand her family and she's just trying to earn their love back, and was basically ranting at that point. It's just so staggering to see up close. I have ventured into a few subreddits to get perspectives, and if you have any familiarity with them you'll see how people who are victims of abuse by their own family can be so utterly broken by it that it'll wreck their brain to where they truly believe they are the problem and they deserve the abuse. Well, that's how she was. She was utterly broken and didn't want help. She didn't want to get better, she just wanted to get worse. It hit me like a truck, honestly, the realization. I really did feel like a fool for trying, even if it was what I was supposed to do in the first place. She was practically berserk at this point and I was just mentally exhausted and needed her to leave before someone called the police. She finally left, but I had a few concerned neighbors check on me. Some of her friends are aware as they have messaged me checking on the situation. I told them the truth and that I just needed to be alone to think what to do next right now. They have revealed that she has given them similar rants after they expressed concern for her. One had even heard that she may be possibly at risk of losing her job. She is definitely having some sort of mental break. From my understanding, she is now completely isolated. She is actually sprinting into a horrible lonely life right now. There's nothing I can do for her at this point, and as selfish as it sounds, I'm just glad it's going to be behind me. Relevant comments. Comment 1, move out, cut all contact, move on. You can't make someone help themselves. Comment 2, sorry it went this way, but you can't help someone who doesn't want it. In many ways, she sounds like an addict, and her addiction is to the vile treatment she gets from her family, and to the faint hope that they'll love her someday. She has to hit rock bottom, just like any addict, but you shouldn't be around when that happens. Update 3, things have kinda wrapped up, but there were some loose ends. I completely forgot to change my mailing address, which I should have done ASAP, so a couple important things got sent to her house. I had to go pick them up plus a final couple of items I want for my move that I left there and decided I wanted to actually take. She was being difficult and not responding to messages in regards to them, so I had to go get them from her myself. I brought a mutual friend just in case. Thankfully she was at least cooperative in letting me get my stuff and it wasn't much of an issue. Everything else was though. She had a lot of nasty things to say. Telling me she was already sleeping around. Telling me how happy she was now that I was gone. Telling me she's finally free of me, how she's going to be so much better off without me. A lot of generic insults and horrible things you would commonly expect from a nasty breakup. And you know what? It was so fucking obvious it was a rehearsed script from her family and you could easily see how miserable she was. She looked like a mess, like she hasn't slept in days. The house was a mess. She wasn't even yelling it. She sounded so exhausted and broken when she said it. She didn't even smile when she said anything. Just a face contorted in hate and anger. She was not the woman I knew anymore. That person was gone. When I was getting ready to leave she was still going on. I was fed up and told her something along the lines of, "Congratulations. Your friends are gone. Your human shields are gone. Your engagement is over. Your support is gone. Anyone who ever treated you like a decent human being is gone. It's just you and your family. I hope you're happy while they bleed you dry." It probably didn't go like that, but something like it. She just stood there. Literally just stood there and looked at me with indifference and walked away as I walked out the door. As we were leaving, the mutual friend Tiffany asked if I was okay. I reassured her I was and I'm just trying to get myself set up to go home next week. She also confirmed that she hears my ex did lose her job for not showing up for several days and basically ghosting them. They're going to try an intervention next week and asked if I could participate, but I'm not delaying my travel because frankly I just want a clean break. I know for a fact that if I stay involved in only going to be witnessing the slow descent to either a full break or a suicide. I just can't do that. Despite all this I'm actually excited for the future, and I have realized that I ignored way too many red flags at the beginning. Even with everything that happened I know I'll be doing good and I'm going to be alright. I expect this to be my final update. I'm still in town until Sunday afternoon so something could happen while I'm still here, but if anything does it won't be exciting. Comments. Comment 1, not participating in the intervention was the right choice. Maybe it'll help her but not your problem. She's proud of sleeping around? Comment 2, she's becoming her family. You did the right thing. I come from a family much like hers. I've watched multiple cousins evolve into the next generation of abusive AHs after once swearing they'd get away. They cared more about their family's approval than they did their mental well-being, and now they're miserable and just like their parents to their own kids.